Get happy. Welcome to PEP 168. That's PEP or Planet Extra Podcast. It's an offshoot of Planet America on ABC Australia, which you can see on Wednesdays at 10 p.m. on ABC TV and 8 p.m. on Fridays on ABC News. And we're back next week, or anytime you like on iView or Facebook at ABC Planet America, or on YouTube on the ABC In-Depth channel. On PEP, we cover all the stuff that's too nerdy for TV. If you're listening to us, you can also find PEP on YouTube and Facebook, where you'll also find timestamps and show notes in the blurb. And if you leave a comment under those videos, we are likely to see it. You can also tweet us at PEPCHASDRDAVE. That's at PEPChasDrDave. If you want to contact me privately, you can ask me on Twitter, and I will allow you to direct message or email me. But for now, I don't know how to introduce this. I've got two people. I don't know how to go first. Let's start with the person who is probably best known for being on PEP 166. Let's face it. But for those who didn't watch PEP, it was a much loved PEP 166, Richie.
Thank
Richard
you.
Cooke here. Richard.
Hi, everyone. Pleased to meet you again.
Who is, for those who didn't listen to PEP 166, ex-US correspondent, very acerbic. Don't mess with him on Twitter. You'll regret it. Thanks for coming, Richie.
My pleasure.
And over here, fresh from holiday, I'm sure I'm allowed to say from where, but he's been away. He's been globe-trotting. We are talking about the man who absolutely never does that phrase I've forgotten. What's the phrase?
Raises the stakes of inconsequential views.
Thank you. Guess who didn't prepare this? I'm talking, of course, about Dr. Dave Smith. Hey, Dr. Dave, welcome back.
Hello. And just a reminder, I'm an associate professor at the United States Studies Centre at the University of Sydney, but I do not speak for either of those institutions, nor do I speak for any other institution I'm a member of, which at last count included West Tigers, Coles Flybys, and I think still Canterbury Hurlstone RSL Club. I don't speak for any of them. Sure. I only speak for myself. No, actually, sorry, Canterbury Hurlstone RSL Club membership's expired.
Surely you have a library card.
University of Sydney library card.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that's
no, I don't. I don't have a local council library card.
Shame.
I've got to admit, I should
you
support.
You are such a booster.
Yeah. No, support local libraries.
Do as he says, not as he does.
Yeah.
This is a pretty exciting PEP, guys. This is the first time we've ever done I don't think, unless, correct me if I'm wrong, I don't think anyone has ever done a podcast with three people in history. But I think we're the first. I think this is PEP breaking new ground. Let's see how it goes. For those at home, we are recording this at 1:30 p.m. Sydney, Friday, 12th of July. I am read up to this morning in America, which means I have not watched the press conference, which apparently was worth watching because I've received about 30 calls for an interview. And that's usually a sign that someone screwed up. So we will get to that pretty soon. Are you guys, how up to date are you guys?
Yeah, it's unwatchable. So I haven't been able to bring myself to watch the whole thing. But on the way in here, the security guard said, "You're here for PEP. I guess I know what you'll be talking about."
There we go.
Unusually, I did watch it.
Wow.
And my read is that it was not too bad for Biden, which means...
It's terrible.
Well, no, it just contributes to the stalemate.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we'll get to the stalemate.
Yes.
No,
it wasn't a catastrophe.
Okay. First of all, what we are grateful for. Richie, are you grateful for anything?
Well, I'm just grateful for me, this is like the Apollo mission.
Yeah.
We're doing a podcast with three people. Yeah. We're boldly going. Yeah. Like, can the microphones actually handle this much energy going into them? Or
I really don't know.
We'll find out. Can he give you no more, Captain?
We're going to need to crack open the thesaurus or the thesaurus. I forgot how you pronounce that word. Thesaurus to come up with a word big enough to describe this podcast. That's a word I've never been able to pronounce. It's the thesaurus, isn't it?
Yeah, it is the thesaurus.
I always used to say thesaurus, but then again, I used to say asia as well.
Yeah.
So don't trust me. Dave, what are you grateful for?
I've just come from Chengdu. I love Chengdu.
He can say that.
I am grateful for Chengdu.
Are you now a spy? Did you get recruited?
It depends on whether surveilling pandas for 3 days counts as a form of spying. Now, even though I spent all that time spying on pandas, I did not see the most famous panda in China, who is Panda Huahua.
Oh.
Panda Huahua's celebrity, like it's more than any human celebrity in the West. It is
That's
absolutely incredible. When you get to the Chengdu research base of giant panda breeding, you will hear people calling for Panda Huahua, regardless of whether Panda Huahua is actually visible anywhere. But it's okay. If you don't see Panda Huahua, there's hundreds of other pandas that
they
you
all
can
look
see.
the same?
No.
Other than those panda dogs, which was in the news a few months back.
Yeah, no. Every panda is quite unique. Even their colouring is actually quite distinctive.
Okay.
Some have very white fur. Some of their fur looks rather dirty, but it's not. It's just this sort of brownish colour.
You put me in my place.
I want to give you a panda fact.
Give me a panda fact. Trivia, Chris. Pay attention.
Trivia, Chris. Pandas are carnivores who vegetarianise themselves, which means they have all kinds of nutritious deficiencies.
Yes.
One of them is iron. So pandas traditionally would often enter into villages to find people's cooking pots to lick them for the iron and salt content. But because pandas, by body mass, have the hardest bite in the world, fourth hardest bite overall, they can actually chew through cooking pots. So they weren't really trying to eat the cooking pots. They were just trying to get the yummy iron and salt. But pandas were known in ancient times as iron-eating beasts. And to this day, there's a book from 1994, The Last Panda by George Scholler, describes like a contemporary panda eating its aluminium watering trough and leaving behind a handful of aluminium nuggets.
That's a great little panda fact.
Yeah. I don't know if that's translatable into a trivia contest, but iron-eating beasts.
Do your best, Trivia, Chris.
Yeah.
I'm kind of imagining the Iron Panda contest. It must be the most piss-weak fitness competition in the world. Like, they're slow to begin with, but then on top of that, they've got no iron.
Yeah.
So,
They're slow, they're clumsy, they're the best.
They would not last in the surf. Okay, what I am grateful for, look, it's a bit of an ongoing joke on this pod about my lack of sleep. It's funny because it's true. And the fact I work during my holidays, for example. But I've got to say, I'm quite touched by how much concern the Peppers have shown for my well-being. It also, that doubles to suggest that I must look like shit at the moment because there have been a lot of comments. And now you guys tell me when I'm looking run down, and obviously I do, when you think I'm pushing to myself too far. And honestly, I'm not sure what other broadcaster has that kind of relationship with their audience, where their audience is like their mum.
You're like the Joe Biden of broadcasting, where people are like, maybe your schedule should be lighter.
Yes, yes. Well, yeah, except instead of reducing me to 10 to 4, it's reducing me from 10 a.m. to 4 a.m. But it's look, but it's nice, and I don't normally take advantage of that, but I know if I get overwhelmed, and as it happens sometimes, I can take a week or two off, and you guys understand, and I appreciate that. There are a lot of people in the correspondence this week who basically told me to have a holiday. That's what I'm saying. Between those comments and the comments giving Richie a big rap, it was a very positive comment section.
It was also, there's a mild irony because people told you to take a break. And then they also asked you to do 2 more 2.5 hour long podcasts in the same week.
That's true. There's a lot of hypocrisy, but that's okay. I can roll with that. But look, I want to read out one correspondence that typified that from Hairy Numbnuts. It is YouTube. Thanks again for all the effort you put into the podcast, but sometimes I wish I could take you to meet 80-year-old you who'd tell you to calm down, remember people are people, and get more sleep, work less, spend more time with your family. Most of us out here in podcast audience land don't just enjoy being entertained and informed, we also care about the humans behind the mic and the camera, which I thought was very nice. I mean, I'm pretty sure you're completely wrong, Hairy Numbnuts. If I could talk to myself from 20 years ago, I'd tell myself to work harder because I knew, because I would know in the future that looking back, I would be very proud of the work I produced at the time, and certainly more proud of the work I produced than the time I spent playing flight control, which is what I would have done otherwise on my phone. But I am still grateful about how many of you guys take the time to look after me. So thank you.
There was also, we said, do you want more? And a lot of people said yes. Someone said that it was so overwhelming that the Peppers court ruled 9-0 in favor of doing another podcast this week. So here we are.
That's extraordinary.
It's legally binding.
Yeah, we had no choice. We're sentenced to this podcast. Let's get into the correspondence. Fruit company correspondence to begin with, from the Frolicking Nerd. This is a couple of weeks back now.
Okay.
L was talking about the United Fruit Company one point in time. And this must be true because many peppers suggested this. So I'm just reading out the Frolicking Nerds one. Chaz, the term Banana Republic comes specifically from the United Fruit Company cooing so many countries, which I think is really interesting. And a few people said that, so I didn't even bother to check it up. It must be true. If three people
there's at least one.
Yeah,
Guatemala. I don't know if it was many countries, but
Well-
at least one where the United Fruit Company was very prominently involved.
Well, Elle did suggest there was a long history of the United Fruit Company, but she didn't actually tie it to the phrase Banana Republic.
Okay, yeah.
Which is interesting. So that's Fruit Company correspondence. A young male voters correspondence, also from a few weeks back. A couple of weeks ago, I spoke about how it seemed from polling that young men, young women moved a lot left from 2013 through to about 2019. But then women moved slightly more left, whereas young men moved right again till they were only slightly left of where they were in 2013, essentially. So while people now talk about young men moving right, they're actually just moving back to where they were, whereas the women have kept moving left.
Yep.
We got a lot of correspondence about that. Carbion said that they thought I glossed over the hope/despair point. Carbion felt that the last few years, young men have lost a lot of hope. I'll quote Carbion, the right-wing online media ecosystem sells something. I don't want to call it hope because it isn't, but it seems like that to young men. Look no further than Andrew Tate. Andrew Tate is successful. Andrew Tate's a terrible human, selling a terrible message. Trump is tapping into that same despair a lot more now, selling the world ruled by men for men and how great America was in the past, a thing that works for young people who literally never worked during those periods and mostly didn't live through them. What do we think? Do we think Carbion's onto something there? This is about hope and despair rather than about just politics?
I think the reason we know that it's likely more than just men moving back to where they were is that it's an international phenomenon.
It is.
Right? We've got Vox in Spain, we've got NR in France, we've got the AFD in Germany. In Poland, these kinds of what have sometimes been called far-right parties, a lot of their fresh support comes from young people in general and young men in particular. And it does seem to be, it's hard to poll this, but it does seem to be linked to difficulty in obtaining what were traditionally considered the trappings of adulthood. Stable job, family, house. If you don't have those sorts of things available to you, I think that can create despair.
Amazingly, that's a wonderful segue, Rich, because amazingly, the next one I was about to get to, correspondence, was from Org Brown, who linked me to a very solid article from the Conversation on young men moving right internationally. And you just summarised it. But for those who want to read more, it's I'll put it in the homework and the show notes and the blurb of the video and, in fact, of the audio. And you can read all about it. Thank you, Org Brown, for a good article. Interestingly, there is a country that's a slight outlier compared to all the other countries on this. Would you care to guess what the country is? The country where young men aren't moving right.
Is it the UK?
No.
Canada.
No, it's Australia.
Interesting.
Yeah, which is interesting. So there we go. And I have no idea why that is. I'm just flagging what was in the article that Org Brown sent from the Conversation. So if you're interested, have a read of that. Yeah, Dave.
Possibly quite a high minimum wage here.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Well,
yeah,
definitely
yeah.
a high minimum wage.
Yeah, no,
Maybe having
there's
a
no
fair-
question that it's highest minimum wage in the OECD. That I would say could be a mitigating factor in the kind of despair that we're talking about. Yes.
Yeah, good call.
Yep.
And by the way, I'd say my disagreement with Carbion a little bit is while I'm sure that's a phenomenon that Carbion pointed to, I don't think it's Trump doing the selling for young men. I think it's online grifters and influencers doing the selling.
Yeah, absolutely.
And they're much more Trump curious.
Yeah.
So
Trump provides kind of a common language and symbolism, but he's not the main salesman.
And one more from Time Out for Fun in the same topic. They know that the second poll I cited, I don't even remember what that poll was based on self-identification. Oh, that's right, yes, as either conservative or liberal. I inferred that a greater incidence of women's identification as liberal meant they'd move left. Time Out pointed out, isn't it just as plausible that the definition of what it means to identify as conservative has moved right? I love that kind of comment.
Yeah.
Time Out's smart.
That's,
Damn you, Time Out. You're right. That was very sloppy.
you've come to the right place.
That's the problem with Chaz Unleashed, though. Like when I was rattling off these stats, I won't even think about it. If Dave was sitting next to me, he'd probably call me out on that. So, Dave's nodding in agreement. Okay, Nitrous Correspondence. I had a go.
What have you been talking about?
This is from the Supreme Court special. I talked about nitrous oxide very briefly.
Okay.
I had a go at Neil Gorsuch for mixing up nitrous oxide, which is laughing gas,
Yes.
with nitrogen oxide, which is air pollution.
Okay.
Riggers D says nitrous oxide is both laughing gas and a potent greenhouse gas. It is produced by microbes in the soil and oceans. These emissions are increased via nitrogen and fertilizer, increasing the microbial activity. Nitrogen oxide is a collective for a bunch of nitrogen and oxygen containing molecules. I'm a current grad student at UOW looking at greenhouse gas dynamics in coastal wetlands. Nitrous oxide is one of my target gases.
Oh, like we always get hammered when we venture into the physical sciences.
Yes, we do. And it serves me right. Apologies to Neil Gorsuch. Even though he did correct himself, he shouldn't have, as it turns out. So thank you very much, Riggers D. Populism Correspondence. I, at one point in time with Richie last week, we referred to Trump as a fake populist and said that Biden was an old-fashioned populist for real. When I say we did, I did. Richie just listened. Davey B said, can you ask Dr. Dave to have a quick chat about how Biden is a populist and what a populist is? He had a great little speech about how he wouldn't call Trump a fascist, and I'm assuming he wouldn't call Biden a populist either. To me, Biden represents the elites, not the commoners, and that's the most important aspect of a populist leader. So, Dave, what do you think? What is a populist, and is Biden one of them?
Okay, so there are lots of different ways of defining a populist, but what nearly every definition of populism has in common is it's an orientation that sees the world in terms of the bad elite versus the good people. So I would not call Biden a populist because even though he sometimes uses populist language, he's been deploying it a lot in the last week, saying, the damn elites want me out of the race. Even though, as many people have pointed out, if anything, what we've seen is the elites catching up to popular opinion about his viability. But no, as a politician, his vision of society is far more like your classic liberal one. It's harmony of interests. It's that that the owners and the workers and the big guys and the little guys can all work together. That is the fundamental Biden view of the world. And he presents himself as one of the little guys, but he doesn't see society as locked in this conflict between the elites and the people. He never has, even if he will occasionally deploy that rhetoric. Now, having said that, I don't think that Trump is a populist either. And one of the reasons is there was a period a few years ago when he would occasionally use this language about elites, but it never came naturally to him. He was never comfortable with it. And that's because he sees himself as an elite. Like, if anything, the thing driving him is his non-acceptance by other elites. In rallies in 2018, he was saying, they call themselves elites. Well, they should call us super elites. like, we're smarter, we're better looking, we're richer. He even makes this constant point about the fact that he's gone to elite universities and elite schools. That is not something that any genuine populist would do, despite the fact that so many self-styled populists now in the US did go to elite schools. But yeah, run the clip.
But we have the greatest base in the history of politics. That's my opinion, okay? You're the smartest. They don't like to say that about. Hey, I went to great colleges. You went to great schools or colleges. You people are successful as hell. They like to try and demean always by saying, well, this and that. Let me tell you, we're winning. You're smarter. You're better looking. You're sharper. And they call themselves elite. But if they're elite, then we're the super elite. It's true. It's true.
Two key points. Okay, it was the super elites comment and the we're better looking that got all the attention. But the two really substantive points. One is he says, not only did I go to great schools, he said, you all went to great schools. Yeah. He actually doesn't like the characterization of his own supporters as being people of low educational attainment, even though that's been the driving force of the analysis of Trump supporters for the last 10 years. The second thing is he says, you're all highly successful, right? So forget the idea that, Trump is appealing to all of these people who've been left behind by the economy. He wants to be appealing to the winners of the economy, right? So he just doesn't fit into the populist style at all. Even if some of the things that he does comport with how we understand populism, I don't think he even qualifies as a fake populist. A lot of the time he's not trying to be a populist. That's something that's been projected onto him by some sort of fairly lazy categories of analysis. Having said that, I did once write an article about populism in foreign policy where I talked about Trump because he is a visible part of this kind of form of populism that you get in countries that have this conception of themselves as we were once powerful, but we're not powerful anymore. He is a continuation of that kind of foreign policy populism style. But generally, when it comes to domestic politics, and populism is generally a domestic vision, he's not a populist, nor is Biden.
It's okay. It doesn't matter that you once wrote that he was a populist because we've already established the new rule with Dave is do as he says, not as he does. but well done, Davey, for picking Dr. Dave shooting me down. That's well done. Richie was scrolling something before. What was that?
So let's look at populism not as a style of politics or as an aesthetic or a rhetorical flourish. What are the policies that populism has? If it has any, a lot of its policies are incoherent, right? They can even be contradictory. But if we were going to pick a suite of policies, which we would say this is what populists do, they are protectionists. They're much more sympathetic to organised labour than conservatives have been traditionally. If you look at people like Hawley and Vance, they're there busting Boeing's chops. They're not sort of in bed with big business in the same way. They are nationalistic, and they're nationalistic in a particular way, which is anti-globalist. They're not sort of let's let it all rip with free trade. It's let's put tariffs in and we'll look after our own people first. They're skeptical of multilateral institutions. And above all else, they are in favour of restricting immigration. I think Trump is a 5 from 5 on populist policy. And I think that if you look at Biden and what he's inherited from Trump, some of the things that he's kept have been some of the most populist policies.
I would say at best, I know Dave, you're going to jump in here, but at best, I would say Trump is a 5 out of 6 because you've missed the bit about raising the taxes on the rich. And if there's a number one policy for populists, it's that. Get smacking the rich with higher taxes, and Trump's obviously the opposite. What were you going to say?
I think everything that you've identified is nationalism, not populism. Now, nationalism and populism, there's a lot of overlap. They often go together, but the fundamental antagonism in nationalism, it's horizontal. It's insider versus outsider. The fundamental antagonism in populism is vertical. It's people versus elite. You can be all of those things, protectionist, anti-immigration, still not anti-globalist, still not populist. On the organised labour point, even though there are people around Trump world who are now taking a more conciliatory view towards organised labour, Trump isn't one of them. Trump's actual presidency was very anti-organised labour. Even though he talks about union workers, he pointedly avoids unions themselves. So when he goes to Detroit to talk to union workers, he talks in a non-union shop to people who might have once been union workers. And I think this is where the rubber actually really meets the road with that program. Even though you've got the odd weirdo like Shorab Amari out there who are like, let's really embrace organised labour. For the most part, they will try to capture the nostalgia around what organised labour used to stand for, which is lifelong employment in the manufacturing industry for white men, coupled with cultural conservatism, but without actually going into bat for organised labour. Now, I don't know. Maybe it will proceed in that direction. I still fundamentally doubt it. But that's one of the things that I think actually stops them from being genuine populists.
How do you like the taste of the back of Dave's hand, Richie?
Well, it doesn't sting too bad. These things always end up as definitional. There are competing definitions of populism, which have a lot of overlap.
Yes.
Well,
So it's a definitional dispute.
That's very generous of you. That's the taste of this podcast for me. That's every
is.
single week. I hope you liked it. That's good stuff. Good stuff, guys. Okay, immunity correspondence. I spoke for 3 hours last week on immunity. Well, this week, 3 days ago, actually, on immunity. I don't know if either of you guys have anything to say about the immunity ruling, but if you can think about it while I respond to two correspondences, they might inspire you, they might not. If you have nothing to say, that's fine.
Okay.
I'm very happy to move on, but just flagging it to you
I
guys.
do have one thing, but you might have already covered it.
Okay, all right. First of all, we'll go to Benjamin, who said, "I'm surprised no one's raising the possibility the future president will just use his power as commander-in-chief to stop Congress meeting to impeach him. Or as you said, use a goon squad. Say, hey, let's head down to Congress as we did on January 6th and I'll pardon you all. Sure, it could go to the Supreme Court, but you put them under house arrest / military tribunal. You think that's far-fetched? That was done by Charles I. And an originalist should know this, as it was the reason the Pilgrims travelled to America in the first place." Cute little twist there at the end. But I did actually forget to mention this last week with what Benjamin raises is that this ruling does make impeachment removals a lot less likely, because now forget about, I'm not talking about, not opening Congress. I'm not talking about the Charles I solution, but this does open the president to openly bribe senators. Like in a way, I mean, obviously Trump was always pressuring the senators when he was impeached before, but now you don't need to be subtle about it. You can be really blatant about just either blackmailing or bribing senators in your impeachment trial, and it makes it that much less likely that you'll get impeached, which is the only other form of accountability that's now left, which is, I thought, interesting. Do you guys want to say anything about that before I get to the next one?
No. Yeah, I mean, a thought experiment I've been enjoying would be, what if Trump was sentenced to prison? And as you know, that being sentenced to prison doesn't mean that you're not president anymore.
No.
You could order the prison that you are held in to be destroyed by the military. That sounds far-fetched, but
Wouldn't you just pardon yourself?
well, no, because
Why wouldn't you pardon yourself?
Well,
man?
look-
having a prison destroyed.
well, this is a real example, right? This is something that Pablo Escobar did when he was held in a Colombian jail
Yes.
and was able to bribe Congress to order the military to. I might be getting some of the link-ups wrong
No,
there,
sure, yeah,
but
yeah.
the military destroyed the jail
Yeah.
that Pablo Escobar was currently in. I think you do it because it's a power move.
Well, look at it. Hey,
You want to be a little bit careful about your instructions to destroy the jail. though.
you're in.
Where are you?
Yeah.
That'd be a fairly precisely targeted demolition.
I'm not saying they wouldn't be using like a bunker buster bomb. They'd be using bulldozers, It's a construction equipment, not military equipment.
Sure.
You just order the military to do it because it's cool.
Sure. Well, look. I mean, it's certainly a cool idea, but I would also now going to feel taste the back of my hand. But I also point out that it was established during the Mueller inquiry that you can't even prosecute a president when they're president. So
Yes.
how's he going to jail in the first place? And secondly, he's in charge of the DOJ. I don't think the DOJ are going to be prosecuting him.
Well, this would be a scenario in which he is sentenced to
Oh,
prison.
since before I see. Okay. All right, fair enough. All right, okay, fair enough then. All right. Something else I forgot to mention. David Grounds. I normally don't say last names. David said, the president could order them to break the law, then promise to pardon them if they obey. But the military should review such an order. That's another thing I forgot to mention. The key point that the main limitation now on what a president can do is not just their conscience, but their subordinates' refusal to carry out orders.
Yep.
That's a real thing in the military. They're supposed to refuse an illegal order. SEAL Team 6 could just say, no, that's clearly an illegal order. And they should say that because if they are prosecuted after the president is gone, they're going to jail. They are not immune. So they should do that. Now, I prefer not to rely on the conscience of SEAL Team 6, but there is that. I should have mentioned that. So thank you for that, David. Also, Mac, there's another one. This is the final one before you guys have anything to say about immunity. Mac says, what do you think is the court's majority's motivation for the terrible Trump immunity ruling? A, incompetence. B, they genuinely believe this ruling is best for the future of the country. Or C, they're trying to protect Trump. Now, look, I'll just go on this first and then I'll just open it to you guys. Hard to read minds. I think it's definitely not A. They're definitely not incompetent, especially not John Roberts. He's the opposite of incompetent. He's got more intelligence than every single person in this podcast combined. But I would suggest you've missed D, which is that you got to remember where John Roberts is coming from. He's coming from the Reagan-Bush DOJs, where at that point in time they weren't obsessed with breaking lots of laws, but what they were obsessed with was the unitary executive theory.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I think he genuinely thinks it's good to make the executive super powerful. And that's at odds with some of his other conservatives, like, say, Neil Gorsuch. But I think that John Roberts somehow found an opportunity to leverage what's happening to Trump to push through a ruling that was much more unitary executive than he needed it to be.
Yeah.
And he made it as unitary executive as he possibly could because that's what he genuinely believes in. That's what I think, but I can't read his mind. Okay, guys, anything you want to say about this or anything to do with immunity?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's to do with an ongoing and really fundamental dispute about the nature of American politics, which is where is the power in America? And the standard conservative objection is not that the government has too much power, it's that the administrative state has too much power.
Yes.
That's quite different from the president having too much power. And one complaint, even amongst Democratic presidents, Bill Clinton used to talk about this, the bunch of fucking bond traders, as he put it, was how surprisingly the presidency didn't have the feeling of as much power as he would have liked. I think that they have a different vision of America with a much more powerful president and an innovated administrative state. And this has, precedent in places like John Locke as well.
It does.
What you can do when you're in authority.
Yes.
He used to, the joke was that John Locke said that the government could flog you but not fine you.
Yes.
And there's some truth to that.
Yeah, and the other thing that comes from John Locke is the theory that, well, sometimes you've got to act outside the Constitution to save it. This is the prerogative theory, and a lot of people read this into the presidential oath of office as well as into the parts of the Constitution that say there are powers not enumerated by the Constitution. It's that to save the country, to safeguard the Constitution, there's a whole range of actions that should be available to the executive that they can pursue fearlessly without being prosecuted for it. The obvious problem with this is the interpretation of a situation where it's necessary to save the country or safeguard the Constitution. You might, for example, be a president who thinks that a civil war going on in Central America is highly relevant to preserving the US Constitution, and so you're going to sell missiles to Iran in order to fund that civil war. Or you might think that a terrorist, a very, very one-off terrorist, or be it very lethal terrorist attack, is so dangerous to the Constitution that you're basically going to implement forms of martial law for certain non-combatants. So that's it gives a huge amount of power because the scope of what can be interpreted as this is a threat to the Constitution. We know what Trump considers to be a threat to the Constitution and a threat to the country. Right, it's people who don't think that he won the last election.
Yes.
So God knows how Trump's going to interpret this. The other thing to say about immunity, which is just recent news, I don't know if you're up on it, but it's been brewing for a long time anyway, is Trump's lawyers predictably are calling for the entire New York judgment to be thrown out because now it involved three pieces of evidence that the Supreme Court has, in its extreme lack of wisdom, ruled inadmissible. That is the testimony of Hope Hicks, the tweets that Trump wrote while he was president. I forget what the third one is, but it's all looking a little bit fucked. At this point now, I mean, and that were like even Amy Coney Barrett thought that was bad.
Yes.
Yeah,
She did.
Anyway,
All right, let's. Do you have anything else or move on?
I think you can move on.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Let's move on to, obviously, we're still in the Biden zone this week. Now, Richie and I on Monday spoke for 3 hours about this topic. So I'm sure we both have more to say. But Dave, you're fresh. So let's start with you. Has Biden allayed your concerns in the last 2 weeks?
No, he hasn't.
Go on.
No, he hasn't. And I'm sure I'm not alone in thinking that the issue now is the declining slope. Okay, I'm convinced that he's got worse in the last 3 months.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Because the shocking thing about the debate was we were told so much by his own team. He's going to be so well prepared for this.
Yes.
Right? They had managed to organise the rules that were most favourable to him. Like, he's going to be so well prepared for this. So, okay, we're expecting another State of the Union type performance. And instead we get that. Now, as you know, I didn't watch it live because I was thinking to myself, if anything happens that's actually going to change the course of the campaign, I'm going to hear about it anyway. Sure enough, I was basically getting this live stream of texts and emails from people who were freaking out. So, clearly it's a downhill slope. So where's he going to be 3 months from now?
Yeah.
Like, let alone 4 years from now. So no, he's done nothing to allay my concerns.
Just before you go on, can I
Yeah.
just throw in one little thing about the debate,
Yeah.
which I didn't think of last week, but
Yeah.
it goes in this little bit here.
Yeah.
Which is there is one thing which I don't think has been mentioned much.
What's that?
That might have compromised Biden. I don't want to make excuses because obviously I think he did terribly and I think he's lost it. But but having said that, just to be fair, I think there is one thing that hasn't been mentioned much, which may have affected him a lot, which is the fact, like we've heard a lot about him going overseas. I don't think that's the issue. I think the issue potentially is that he just finished a week where Hunter Biden was on trial.
That's true, yeah.
That would have stressed him out more than anything,
That's
I would
true.
have thought. And stress does impact you when you're a little bit decrepit. And so I don't think it would have helped.
No, I mean, the other thing is that source of stress isn't going away.
Yeah, that's true.
So, I mean, these problems are not going away. It doesn't matter how good a night he has at any point from this point on, because the Biden that we saw in the debate is not going to get less frequent. He's going to get more frequent. So that is my assessment of the substance of it. In terms of the politics, this staring match has been quite incredible.
Yes.
Okay, because I keep thinking that one side has the upper hand and then the other side doubles down. This has been the pattern that we've seen for the last week, continuing today. So Biden had what his supporters were calling a good press conference, showed his mastery of foreign policy. Immediately afterwards, another congressional Democrat calls for him to step down. Like, nobody is letting up the pressure at this point, which is pretty incredible to see, because usually you would have expected someone to back down by this point. Now,
Well, it looked like the congressional Democrats were going to.
yes.
And then about halfway through the week, and then they
It
got a
did,
second
yes,
win.
yeah. Like when I saw both AOC and Chuck Schumer, as well as James Clyburn, I'm like, those three between them have they're basically carrying the whole party. But no.
Yeah, I was going to say, the moment for me when I thought, oh, this is
Wrapped
over.
up.
This is
Yeah.
over was when Jerry Nadler, who was one of the people
Yes.
who turned against him.
Yeah.
And probably the most senior person who
Yes.
turned against him.
Yeah.
Then 2 days later, then came out of a meeting and said, "Yeah, I support him now."
Yep.
And they said, "Well, do you think he's the best candidate?" And he said, "He's the only candidate."
Yeah.
At that moment, I thought, "Oh, it's over." But
And-
then Nancy Pelosi had other ideas.
Yeah, and
Go
then
on.
to own up to my mistakes, I texted you at that point with an addle point saying, I think it's turned decisively in Biden's favour.
Yeah.
Then out comes Nancy Pelosi. And okay, what I love about this is, so Biden's just spent the last week saying, I'm staying in the race. Only the Lord Almighty can get me out of this race. I'm staying in the race. Nancy Pelosi says, with the kind of passive-aggressive power move that you can only do over the age of 80, he's got to make a decision.
It's up to the president to decide if he is going to run. We're all encouraging him to make that decision because time is running short. I think overwhelming support of the caucus. It's not for me to say. I'm not the head of the caucus anymore, but he's beloved. He is respected, and people want him to make that decision, not me.
He has made the decision. He has said firmly this week he is going to run. Do you want him to run?
I want him to do whatever he decides to do. And that's the way it is. Whatever he decides, we go with.
Masterful. And by the way, as soon as she set that tone, it was followed by a bunch of other people.
Yes.
Like Tim Kaine did exactly the same thing afterwards as well.
I have complete confidence that Joe Biden will do the patriotic thing for the country. And he's going to make that decision. He's never disappointed me. He's always put patriotism and the country ahead of himself, and I'm going to respect the decision that he makes.
It can never be over.
No.
It can never be over. It doesn't matter what Joe Biden says from this point on. He can say, I'm ordering Donald Trump arrested by SEAL Team 6 and he's going to be put in front of a televised military tribunal. And the headline afterwards will be, Joe Biden successfully strung a sentence together.
Yeah.
He can only ever do gaffes or not gaffes. And anytime there's a story about a not gaffe, it just draws attention to the gaffes.
Well, yeah, press conference today, perfect example. He actually talked very cogently about foreign policy, about relations with China, about relations with Russia, but he also referred to Zelensky as President Putin, introduced Zelensky as President Putin, and then referred to Kamala Harris as Vice President Trump. Yeah, it's always going to be that mix. Now, one of the things that is really contributing to the stalemate is the polling.
Yeah.
Because, so the polling immediately afterwards moved about 3 points in Trump's favour.
Yep.
It's now about 2 points in Trump's favour. I don't know whether that gap's going to close any further. In the context of this race, a 2-point move is big, especially a 2-point move in that direction. 2-point move in that direction, I would say, makes it nearly impossible for Biden to win. But nonetheless, it's not so bad that it can convince Biden to get out of the race. So I think that the polling is contributing to the stalemate. If there had been polls immediately afterwards showing a 9 or 10 point shift to Trump, that might have been able to get him out, but these polls aren't going to get him out.
There are also positive polls for
Yes.
Biden. Like not just not very
Yeah.
negative polls. Like Morning Consult had Trump leading Biden 47 to 45 in the swing states,
Yes.
which is the smallest gap in the swing states since October.
Yeah.
Biden led Trump. This is after
Yes.
the debate. Biden led Trump in Michigan and Wisconsin by 5 points in Michigan, by 3 points in Wisconsin. And then the numbers I'm about to read, we haven't seen this so far. Arizona, Biden's only down by 3. Georgia, he's down by 1. Nevada, he's down by 3. North Carolina is down by 3.
Yeah.
For some reason, it blew out in Pennsylvania. Trump was miles ahead.
Yeah.
But also independents, Trump and Biden were tied in the swing states. And that was registered voters.
Yes.
As we established, Biden has better and likely voters. So that poll couldn't have been better for Trump, for Biden. And that was right when he needed it. That dropped. And then you've got all over the place when you're talking about what percentage of Democrat voters want him to drop out. Reuters Ipsos had 66% of Democrat voters saying they want Biden to stay in the race. Wall Street Journal had 66% of Democrat voters wanting him to drop out of the race. NYT had 48% wanting him to stay, 47% wanting him to go. CNN had 56% wanting him to go. CBS had 59% saying he should stay. YouGov had 47 to 39 saying Biden should go. And that's especially about the kids. 58 to 30 of the 18 to 29 say he should go, whereas 25 to 61 of the 65 plus say he should go. But this is interesting. They had fewer people saying that. So they had 22% of Democrats saying Harris is more likely to beat Trump than Biden, but 30% saying Biden is more likely to beat Trump than Harris.
Yeah.
So even in a negative poll, there was that silver lining. So it's kind of all over the place.
Oh yeah, and the polling of Biden versus Trump as opposed to Harris versus Trump, that's also all over the place. About half the polls I've seen say Harris would do better, half say Biden would do better. Now, I've got to admit, I thought that the polls would be worse. So I will cop to my basic mistake here because I can now see the contours of that error. There was a Simpsons episode where they're watching some thriller And Homer's there saying, "Oh, that submarine looks so fake. What, an octopus!" I feel like this was my "what, an octopus" moment, where after months of cynicism about the inability of anything to change the direction of the race, suddenly I'm like, "Oh shit, this is going to do it." Now, one of the reasons I thought it might was because not only because of the poor performance itself, but also like it's a bad look when you've got so many members of your own party calling for you to step aside. I was forgetting about all the times this has happened to Trump with no effect whatsoever. And, it's very easy to imagine if Biden a month from now is getting the Democratic nomination, everyone's going to fall in line behind him as well. And... yeah, go on.
Before I go, I was just going to throw to Richie. Before I throw to Richie, because Richie's just, he's got the hand out to be tagged in.
Nice.
But before that, I just want to note one thing about the polls as well.
Yeah.
Even though you're right, it hasn't been a huge move.
Yes, yeah.
2 points down, which is, like you said, is that's exactly what's happened. The 530 average has gone from, the 538 average has gone from 0.2 difference on debate day to 2.1 deficit now.
Yeah.
There has literally never been a 2-point deficit to the Democrats. There's the Democrats having a 2-point deficit in presidential polling since 2000.
Yeah.
like the Democrats have been ahead on national vote the whole time. And so being 2 points down means that's a smashing.
Yeah, except for earlier this year and last year.
I don't think it's been more than 2 points. Let's not coin the 538.
But 538 only started its poll averages recently.
No, but they then project back.
Really?
Yeah,
I thought it was about a 4 or 5 point.
That's why they're saying that
okay.
that's since early 2000s.
Yeah. Okay, no.
But look, I'm just telling you what they say.
Yeah.
Like maybe they do have a gap and anyway, that's what they said. Richie, do you want to jump in and then Dave can continue?
Yeah.
Yeah, this was exactly when Dave said, "Isn't this just like Trump?" I have been wondering, could this be a 2016 style reverse psychology election where the media and punditry class are saying you can't possibly vote for this guy, and the American public says, "Watch us."
Yeah.
His entire, I'll talk about this in a second after Dave's done a bit more, but his entire strategy is Trumpian.
Yeah.
An entire strategy. Like, you go through the interviews he's done this week.
Yeah.
He is just ripping off Trump.
Yeah.
But anyway, so I'll talk about that in a second.
Okay, so in terms of how this is going to go, I've been trying to find some kind of analytical framework that could describe what's going on. Okay, and I apologize in advance to all of the economists, but what I've settled on is the Rubinstein bargaining model, which is a game theoretic model that describes a situation where there's a heavy discount factor, right? Or a heavy discount factor can be part of a Rubinstein bargaining model. That is, it gets worse for everybody the longer the bargaining goes on.
Yep.
One of the insights of the Rubinstein bargaining model, though, is the side with the stronger bargaining position is the side that's going to be relatively less hurt by how long it goes on for.
Yes.
I think in this situation, it's Biden who is relatively less hurt by how long it goes on for. I wouldn't have said that at the start because I would have thought his candidacy would have been fatally weakened by all of this, but it hasn't. It's been weakened, but not fatally. Whereas there's a literal time limit for the other side. You've got to get this. If you're going to get him replaced, you've got 34 days now to do it. So. For the other side, time is actually going to run out very, very soon. If Biden just runs out the clock, he's the nominee. Sure, he's got to repair all the damage that has been done. But I think he is in the stronger position. He's also in the stronger position here because he is the one who is required to actually, he's the only one who can blast himself out, essentially. But yeah, that would be my analysis.
Look, I think that's a really good observation. I would actually say it's a double Rubinstein.
A double Rubinstein,
because number one, the point you made is absolutely correct. But on top of that, there's another level where he loses less than the Democrats, and that is, for him, the difference in the long run, if he loses the election, he loses by 1 point, loses by 8 points, who gives a shit?
Yeah.
For Democrats, they give a shit big time.
Yes.
Because they're the difference between having 49 seats in the Senate
Yep.
and having 42 seats in the Senate
Huge.
is massive for them.
Yes.
It's everything for them.
Yeah.
So I think that so that's another level of Rubenstein that they'd be thinking to themselves, like if we damage him to the point where it becomes a smashing,
Yes.
we're worse off.
Yep.
We're better off just swallowing our lumps
Yep.
and losing by 3 or 4 points rather than risking losing by 10 points.
Yeah.
Whereas he doesn't make any difference.
Yes. Yeah.
Richie, you want to say something?
Yeah, I mean, I think if we're talking about it, it's time for some game theory.
Yeah.
It's a kill the king scenario, right? Where you have to do it the first time.
Yes.
Now, in this situation, the king must order himself executed. That is not something we typically see kings do.
Yes.
He must put himself into exile. Now, Joe Biden has nothing to lose. What's his plan if he steps aside? It's to die.
To die, exactly.
Yeah. So, and Jill Biden has nothing to lose. So they would have to be compelled out with mechanisms which don't exist all the way until you get up to the 25th Amendment. And that's too strong medicine. So I think that in terms of the procedure, I think that the Democrats have to internally look at replacing him. But if he refuses, and it really seems
Yeah.
like he's refusing to go, then there may not be an alternative but to back down.
I think a lot of people believe their own rhetoric about Joe Biden will have the decency to stand aside for the good of America.
Yeah.
Nah.
He won't.
I'm sorry to keep on bringing up Hunter Biden, but it actually occurred to me.
You're not sorry. You're not sorry at all, Chaz.
I've been a little bit obsessed with him over the years. But actually, something has occurred to me, which, once again, has not been mentioned. Maybe because I've got Hunter on the brain. But another reason that he might be kind of keen to hold on to the presidency as long as he can. And if we're talking about him stepping down,
Yeah.
it's stepping down from the presidency. Let's face it.
Yeah.
He might be keen to just hold the power of pardon just in case
Yep.
with his son.
He might.
Like, I know he said, I'm not going to commute the sentence, I'm not going to pardon, but like if Hunter got hit with 20 years, which is actually not going to happen, but possible,
Yes.
like Joe would be thinking to himself, it'd be nice just to hold the card.
Yeah.
Just in case.
It is possible if you are Hunter Biden and know all the other things that you have done that you haven't been prosecuted for.
Anyway, so let's throw that there. I mean, like, I don't think anyone's even mentioned that, but that might be in the back of his mind as well.
Yeah.
Okay, well, look, I've got a few things to say about this, and then we'll get on to like the ins and outs of the Democrats a bit more. First of all, I just want to just note just how pathetic the Biden campaign has been in the last 2 weeks in trying to actually deal with people's complaints. Like when the debate first happened, everyone said, why doesn't he hold a press conference?
Yeah.
Why doesn't he do interviews or etc.? Okay, so this was the first press conference, which they refer to as a big boy press conference. 2 weeks later.
Yes.
Pathetic. Right? And the interviews, I'm going to get into them in a second. They were also pathetic as well. I actually saw an interview this week with a Biden biographer, which I actually thought really shed some light on just how awful I don't know if it's the White House or the campaign team, but the people who mind him are.
Chris, you've also reported extensively on this president in the White House. You've interacted with him for this book. Okay, what were those interactions like?
Well, the thing to understand here is that the DNA of this White House is controlling the narrative.
Yeah.
And I can tell you, having written a book about it, that this White House is the most battened down, buttoned up, scripted White House in modern history. So while I was able to interview in real time almost all of Joe Biden's inner circle, when it came to Biden himself, the deal was written answers to written questions. I'd never heard of that before.
Was that a red flag for you?
Well, look, you can look at it 2 ways. I mean, this is obviously a White House with either with something to hide or just obsessed with controlling the narrative.
Even his biographer, he wasn't doing an interview with. Which I find incredible. Also, I just want to also flag that this is just a random point that there is another element to this which we haven't discussed yet, which is the donors. Apparently, donations are drying up. And according to the NBC, They quoted a few sources close to Biden's re-election campaign. One said it's already disastrous. Another said the money is absolutely shut off. Two of them said that this month is on path to be down by about half or more from large donors alone. The campaign obviously denies this, but I've just stopped trusting them. And the other thing which is interesting as well is that we talked a little bit, Rich, on Monday about the delegates and about how there is a small crack in the language used by the pledged delegates.
Yeah.
That might allow them, I think the phrase is in good conscience,
to
vote for someone else. Apparently, Politico has now spoken to 4 delegates who've received calls from the Biden campaign sussing them out.
Yep.
And apparently some delegates have been exploring the terms under which they can vote their conscience. So that may be where this story is going, to the actual delegates themselves. But I want to now just go through the interviews and how, in my view, this shows that he's just following a Trumpian strategy, and it's not a very good one. Okay, let's start off with the Stephanopoulos interview, which is where we ended the last podcast. For a start, he turned up with Trump bronzer on for the first time that I can remember.
Yep.
Like his problem was skin color. He blatantly denied polls. Like he was suggesting that the New York Siena poll, he was 10 points behind before the debate, which is just not even close to true. So that's classic Trumpian sort of denial. When he was asked about the fact he had a 36% favorability rating, he said, "I just don't." And every poll, not just one, every poll has him in the mid to high 30s. Every poll. So that is a huge level of deniability. There were also massive exaggerations. He said, after there's a quote, I'm going to play some excerpts in a second, but I don't want to play excerpts for everything. He said, after that debate, I did 10 major events in a row, including until 2 o'clock in the morning after the debate. Now, I don't know what time frame he's referring to there. He's insinuating he did 10 events up to 2 a.m. But I can tell you that according to the Washington Post, I'll read what they said. Biden has appeared in public 4 times since a rally Friday in North Carolina for remarks on a Supreme Court decision on extreme weather at Stonewall National Monument in New York and at a Medal of Honor ceremony at the White House on Wednesday. That was 2 days later, this report, to speak for a total of 32 minutes, exclusively while using teleprompters.
Wow.
So 4 events, 32 minutes in total, teleprompter the whole time.
Did people at those events call him sir and start crying though?
That's the one thing he hasn't used. He hasn't used sir yet. Also, just as if to reiterate the exact problem he had during the debate, he did that thing where he didn't keep a straight thought, where he'd start an answer and then he'd move to a different thing and then a different thing and a different thing, like he had ADD. He was asked, did you know how badly the debate was going? And this is how he responded. Just have a listen to this run of thoughts and just also how bullshit all the thoughts are.
What were you experiencing as you were going through the debate? Did you know how badly it was going?
Yeah, look, the whole way I prepared, nobody's fault mine. Nobody's fault but mine. I prepared what I usually would do, sitting down, as I did come back with foreign leaders or the National Security Council, for explicit detail. And I realized about partway through that, I get quoted, the New York Times had me down at 10 points before the debate, 9 now, or whatever the hell it is. The fact of the matter is that what I looked at is that he also lied 28 times. The way the debate ran, not my fault, nobody else's fault.
Like there was no connection between those 3 topics. And they're all lame excuses. And I just want to just compare to Trump because we've been doing this all year. I have a number of times when we've seen these Biden clips gone, well, have you seen Trump?
Yeah.
Trump does that stuff all the time.
Yes,
the ADD thing. He
Yeah.
does that all the time. But you know what? The difference between Trump and Biden? Trump will come back to what he started with. Like Trump remembers what he began with, whereas Biden just gets lost. He just goes on this run, and he has no idea what the question was, and that's why he drifts off into embarrassment. Is because he loses track. Like the train derails after 10 seconds, and it never gets back on the track. And that's just a perfect example right there, Richie.
It is remarkable when you read the spin of around these interviews, and then you go and watch them. You know, you read the reporting, it's not just from the campaign either, where people are like, this is an assured performance by Biden and he silenced the critics, or, you know, he's shown that he can still kind of be cogent. And then you watch something like that and it doesn't look a whole lot better than the debate.
No. Well, look, it was better, but not by much. No. I agree. And by the way, I didn't even play the worst excuse of all.
And how quickly did it come to you that you were having that bad night?
Well, it came to me as having a bad night when I realized that even when I was answering a question, even though they turned his mic off, he was still shouting. And I let it distract me. I'm not blaming it on that. But I realized that I just wasn't in control.
Dude, there was a split screen the entire debate. Trump was not yelling at you at any point in time. Like, Trump didn't even talk over it, didn't even try to talk over him until they got to the golf section, which everyone really cared about. It's just complete delusion. Like, that's not even close to reality.
Also, saying my opponent got in my head is not a strong tactic in a political campaign.
Yeah. Also, a problem for him during his interview was that Stephanopoulos he's a bit of a pro. He knows how to, if he wants to get someone, he knows how to get them. And he clearly decided, like the media this week, that he was going to get Biden. And the way he did it was, Biden clearly shows up with his pre-prepared excuses. Stephanopoulos just kept on asking him the same question 4 times. Just the same question over and over again, knowing that after the first time, after he got the excuse out, he'd be stuffed. And that's why Biden was struggling so much. But it really showed up when they were talking about cognitive tests, which is the most obvious thing that Biden should do. Take a cognitive test, put the results out to public.
Yep.
Like, I know it's none of our business, but if you want to prove yourself, it's the only way you can.
Even Hopium Chronicles guy is suggesting
yes.
that the White House needs to be more transparent with medical tests.
Absolutely. Anyway, and just listen to his struggling to come up with reasons why he shouldn't have his cognitive test. It's just not very convincing at all.
Have you had a full neurological and cognitive evaluation?
I get a full neurological test every day with me. And I've had a full physical. I had, I've been at Walter Reed for my physicals. Yes. The answer is
I know your doctor said he consulted with a neurologist. I guess I'm asking a slightly different question. Have you had the specific cognitive tests, and have you had a neurologist, a specialist, do an examination?
No one said I had to. No one said, they said I'm good.
Would you be willing to undergo an independent medical evaluation that included neurological and cognitive tests and release the results to the American people?
Look, I have a cognitive test every single day. Every day I have that test. Everything I do. Not only am I campaigning, but I'm running the world. And that's not how it sounds like hyperbole. But we are the essential nation in the world. Madeleine Albright was right. And every single day, for example, today, before I come out here, I'm on the phone with the Prime Minister of, anyway, I shouldn't get into detail, but with Netanyahu. I'm on the phone with the new Prime Minister of England. I'm working on what we're doing with regard to, in Europe, with regard to expansion of NATO and whether it's going to stick. I'm taking on Putin. Every day, there's no day I go through, there are not those decisions I have to make every single day.
And you have been doing that, and the American people have been watching, yet their concerns about your age and your health are growing. So that's why I'm asking, to reassure them, would you be willing to have the independent medical evaluation?
Watch me there's a lot of time left in this campaign. It's over 125 days.
So the answer,
make a decision.
The right answer right now is no, you don't want to do that right now.
No, I've already done it.
I love it. We are the central country in the world. Do you know what central country, how that translates into Chinese? Zhongguo.
That's China.
That's China.
Yeah.
Yeah, we are the Middle Kingdom, baby.
That is a great call, but I do need to just, I don't blame you at all, but I do need to correct you slightly.
Yeah.
In that you think he said central because his pronunciation is so terrible.
Oh, did he say essential?
No, I know what he meant to say.
What did he mean to say?
50 times before. He meant to say indispensable.
Oh.
He just said so badly that it sounded like a 2-syllable word. That's what Madeleine Albright said. We are the indispensable nation. And he said it so many times. I know that's what he was trying to say. But he just really, really buggered it up.
When before, Chaz, you were saying, what is this Biden White House thinking? Why is he not out there doing press conferences? Why is he not out on the front foot? And when people are saying that same kind of why not question, why is he not releasing a cognitive test? Isn't the answer to all of those questions the same?
Yeah.
He can't do it.
Well, then he should resign.
Yeah.
I'm not being naive here. I'm just saying you got two choices. Either you address the concerns or piss off. There is no other choice. The concerns aren't going to go away. So I mean, you either roll the dice, take your chances, and if he's that hell bent on going for it, then sure, fight, dude, fight and roll the dice. But anyway, that's a Bidenism for me to just stop halfway through my sentence and say anyway. It's catching. But this is the most Trumpian part of all. I just couldn't believe this. When he was confronted for about the 12th time on the particular topic, this is what he went to. I'm not even gonna foreshadow it. I'm just gonna play it, and you guys can enjoy the most Trumpian response ever to a question. And George Stephanopoulos just wasn't having it at all.
What's your plan to turn the campaign around?
You saw it today. How many people can you draw crowds like I drew today? You find me any more enthusiastic than today? Huh?
I mean, I don't think you want to play the crowd game. Donald Trump can draw big crowds. There's no question about that.
He can draw a big crowd, but what does he say? Who's he have?
So going to crowds, that's not going to work. And when he was called on it, his response was just nonsense. Anyway, my point is that it was a terrible interview, and he kept on using Trumpian tactics, and I haven't even played the most played clips. There was one. I'll just play it there.
And if you stay in and Trump is elected, and everything you're warning about comes to pass, how will you feel in January?
I feel as long as I gave it my all and I did the goodest job as I know I can do. That's what this is about.
That's very telling.
Yeah.
It's the personal power infomercial model of being the president.
Yeah.
That it's all about your kind of moxie and your team and us against the world. Well, you can't be the world against itself. And that's what we're starting to see here, that under pressure, it's returning to this kind of 1980s Joe Biden mindset around trying to push me out and I'm not going to let them.
On that note, then there was a Scarborough.
Because I'm a Welsh coal miner's son, damn it.
And on that note, there was a Scarborough interview then, which I'm just going to say one thing. I don't want to go on forever on this, but it's on what you just talked about. And it was really funny because we laugh about Joe Scarborough being the Baghdad, what's his name, Baghdad Bob?
Yeah.
The Baghdad Bob of the Biden administration. And it was funny because Joe Scarborough tweeted out the morning before the interview. He tweeted this out. Politics is a strange thing. A dismal debate performance puts an 81-year-old political veteran in a position to be defiant against corporate media, billionaire donors, and party elites and senators, he said. And then the next day, it's almost like it was giving him the line to try and argue with, because the next day, out comes Biden, just argues exactly that.
I'm getting so frustrated by the elites. Now, I'm not talking about you guys, but about the elites in the party, who they know so much more. But if any of these guys don't think I should run against me, go ahead, announce for president. Challenge me at the convention.
So then he's running against elites.
Actually, I've got to say, especially with the sort of echoey noise, a couple of weeks ago I mentioned the recording "Shut Up, Little Man." He is sounding more and more like "Shut Up, Little Man." Yeah.
He does sound incredibly like, Google it if you haven't heard Shut Up Little Man. Joe Biden does sound a lot like the guy from Shut Up Little Man now.
I don't give a fuck who you are. You want to try and stop me? I will kill you in 1 fucking minute. Not 1 minute. 30 seconds. Yeah. Go ahead, you cock-sucking fucking piece of shit.
They've decided that the to kill a monster, you must become a monster, right? Right down to the bronzer.
Yes, that's a good call. And then we had the radio interviews as well. And
yes.
And what people, when I refer to the radio interviews, there were two of them. There was one in Philadelphia, one in Milwaukee. I know what everyone's thinking. As soon as I mention them, they're thinking about the same viral gaffe, which is this one here.
By the way, I'm proud to be, as I said, the first vice president, first black woman to serve with a black president. I'm proud of the role of the first black woman in the Supreme Court. There's just so much that we can do because together there's nothing. Look, this is the United States of America. There's nothing beyond our capacity.
Yeah, we've heard that point before. Okay, it's the United States of America is nothing you can't do. That got around about Biden calling himself the first black vice president.
And that was after the radio station edited the interview.
No, that was the other interview.
Oh,
that was the
okay.
other interview. I'm going to get to that.
Ah,
I'm gonna
okay.
get to that.
Right.
No, but I mean, I'm about to make the same point.
Yes.
I don't. Verbal fluffs don't bother me.
No.
They haven't bothered me the entire time.
Well, also, Biden's been doing them for a long time.
Totally.
He called Barack Obama Barack America.
Yes, yeah.
In 2010.
Totally. Him calling Zelensky Putin doesn't bother me. That stuff doesn't bother me. Like I know when it happens now, it just reminds everyone of everything else.
Yes.
But I'm not being inconsistent here. I'm exactly the same as I was 6 months ago. That stuff does not bother me. I care about the mental process underneath.
Yeah.
But the thing that stands out for me is that Philadelphia interview, we discovered later that they supplied 8 questions to them and they picked 4.
Yeah.
So he had that and they knew what 4 they picked. So he had that answer memorized.
Yeah.
It was on radio.
Yes.
He probably had it written in front of him. In fact, we know he had stuff written in front of him for radio interviews because you could hear during the Scarborough interview, you could hear him rustling papers.
Yes.
So he has the answers written there.
Yeah.
Okay. And even when he has the answers written in front of him, he still screws them up.
Yeah.
Which is incredible.
It's not just that he can't talk, he can't read.
Yes.
And it seems like the strategy, they're trying to get him to switch from confused dementia to angry dementia.
Yeah.
And I don't think that's going to work.
Probably not. And by the way,
because everyone loves a bit of angry dementia.
And by the way, because I like to be fair, I actually wanted to play that gaffe long. Because he said at the beginning, like I said before, I wanted to play him saying before what he meant to say.
Right.
But I couldn't. And you know why?
Why?
Because they've taken that off the internet, which I think is also telling. Because I'm betting that the radio station wouldn't have taken it down if someone hadn't asked them to take it down. So
didn't the radio station reprimand the presenter?
They sacked the presenter.
Yeah.
When it came out
Wow.
that the questions were prearranged.
Yeah.
That was the Philadelphia interview. Then the Milwaukee is the one you're referring to, which is where they offered them 5 questions rather than 8 because they thought 8 was too many to pick from this time.
Yeah.
And the Milwaukee picked 4 questions, and they happened to be the same 4 questions, which is how he discovered about this. Because CNN was going, hang on, how come you guys had the exact same 4 questions? But even when they hand selected 4 out of the 5 presented questions, and they knew what they were, they still ended up getting the radio station to edit 2 parts out of the interview.
That's bad.
Which is extraordinary. So, and by the way, the Biden campaign was attacked for providing questions and interviews. Their response was, from campaign spokesperson Lauren Hitt, it's not at all an uncommon practice for interviewees to share topics they would prefer. These questions were relevant to the news of the day. The president was asked about his debate performance as well as what he delivered for black Americans. We do not condition interviews on acceptance of these questions, and hosts are always free to ask the questions they think that will best inform their listeners. Now, fair enough, I guess, except they then promised they'd stop feeding questions before interviews. So, which is it? Is it a common practice or is it not? You're a journalist. Is it a common practice, Rich?
Well, it's a frowned on practice.
Yeah.
I mean, certainly if you're trying to have an independent interview, there are scenarios in which it does happen, but they tend to be understood as softball promotional interviews. So it's a real problem if you're trying to provide political accountability and electoral accountability during a campaign.
those wondering why these guys are just cracked up laughing for no apparent reason, I don't know if we should go into it. Should we go into it? Look, I think
we should do a separate podcast about this one day where we talk through Chaz facts in their entirety. But we should tease it now.
We used to have on Chaser Productions. We had a Google Doc which everyone wrote in Chaz facts. It's called the Chaz facts document because I have a lot of oddities, which you peppers will be probably not surprised to hear. And one of them that didn't get into the Chaz facts document is that I appear to conduct electricity. And sometimes when I touch something that's metallic that has electricity going through it, you can see me shirk in pain like I just did then when I touched the microphone. It's,
This is like those scenes in The Boys where you find out a character's been a soup the whole time. It's just a terrible superpower.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I have the worst superpower. The superpower of being in pain when I touch objects that have electricity going through them. Anyway, I don't even remember where we were. I just hijacked that with my oddities.
We were talking about political accountability.
Yes.
And the idea is as a journalist involved in a political campaign is you're trying to have a bit of a stress test to find out what a candidate is all about and also find out whether they can withstand the ins and outs of daily pressure. And what's interesting is that even though this is the president, right, if you were just treating this as an ordinary, everyday politician, you would think this guy can't do the fundamentals of retail politics. This is like a Mal Meninga style interview where you're starting off and you just, you can't keep it straight. You can't get your talking points across.
Yeah.
This is supposed to be 101 stuff, and the president can't do it during a presidential election campaign.
The Mal Meninga presidency. That's fantastic. For those who don't know what we're referring to, and there's some Americans who listen to this podcast, and there was no way they'd know. Mal Meninga is a footballer in Australia who ran for Parliament for about 15 seconds, 20 seconds.
Yeah.
I remember September the 24th, 2001. It was the first day where ABC TV News, the Canberra edition, was coming back on air. Now, it was also the first day of Mal Meninga's political career. It was his first radio interview as a politician. Seemed to be going okay. And then something happened.
Why are you standing?
A number of reasons. I guess throughout my sporting career, I've had the urge to do community work, and I think I've really worked hard on that aspect. My 16 years in Canberra, and the thing about that is that I was, I guess, a public figure, and I was put on the podium where I was just a person out there, making sure that I was. I'm buggered it. I'm sorry.
So Mal Meninga is leaving the studio, and he says that he can't do it.
Mal Meninga's political career had lasted less than 30 seconds.
It's great. It's great.
And he, at the end of it, Mal Meninga had the decency to say, "No, I'm buggered."
Yes.
So Mal Meninga passed a political test that Joe Biden can't. He resigned, maybe not with dignity, but he resigned.
Well, he wasn't 81. Again, and the other thing is that while we're talking about this, and just while this has been happening, there's just been non-stop stories with more problems, and they're not going to go away.
No,
they're not going to go. So let me just race through just some of the stories of the last week. And by the way, the New York Times has run 192 stories on this subject since the debate, including, and I got that number like 3 days ago.
Yeah.
So that's a week and a half, including 50 editorials and 142 stories. Semaphore had a story about a West Wing official saying that they feared some policy decisions were being made without Biden's knowledge. This is an actual West Wing policy official. They said it's unclear even, this is what Semaphore said, it's unclear even to some inside the West Wing policy process which policy issues reach the president and how. Major decisions go into an opaque circle that includes White House Chief of Staff Jeff Zients, and return concluded. Another story from Washington Post. One senior White House official who's worked with Mr. Biden during his presidency, vice presidency, and 2020 campaign said that Mr. Biden should not seek re-election. After watching Mr. Biden in private, in public, and while traveling with him, the official said they no longer believe the president had what it took to campaign in a vigorous way and defeat Donald J. Trump. The reason that official was anonymous was because they wanted to still work with him. So this is one of his one of his workers who wants to keep on working with him thinks he should pull out. Then you've got Axios leaked out that in all of Biden's notes when he goes to an event, someone takes a massive page-size photo of how to walk to the podium from off stage. Let me tell you, these photos aren't complicated. They're just, here are the curtains, there is the podium. Walk to it. Right? It's just, then, Wall Street Journal in 2022, just after the Russian invasion of Ukraine, German officials, aware of Biden's fatigue at night, planned an early evening meeting for Biden to talk about Ukraine. Biden didn't show up. Instead, Blinken arrived and announced that Biden had gone to sleep. Now, there were two sources for that. Matthew Miller, a State Department spokesperson, denied it, though. The same Wall Street Journal story said, far back as 2022, senior aides have dismissed travel suggestions over worries the president doesn't have the stamina. The aides have often erected barriers to keep reporters from asking Biden questions, and they often blast music so questions can't be heard when the president exits.
Wow.
Also, when he holds news conferences, officials often reach out to reporters beforehand who they think the president will call on to determine what questions they plan to ask, which I would have thought is also a massive no-no as well.
This is just a remarkable... I mean, the fact that they would be using amplified music to drown out questions. This is a very ancient story in some ways, isn't it? This is a power behind the throne story where the king is infirm and then the worm tongue style advisor or courtier or vizier to the sheikh or whatever is really the one in charge. I don't know any of those stories which have been and then everything was fine and he got a second term and ruled with a steady hand.
Ruled with a steady hand.
I'm kind of reminded of the fact that Mao was really into sleeping pills.
Yes.
Mao Zedong. And
Mao Meninga.
No. Mao
Meninga. Now there's a thought.
He was do a few pills after the interview.
And his staff were under instructions issued by Mao himself. Do not act on anything I say when I'm under the influence of sleeping pills. But there was one time when that got broken.
What was that?
That was when he ordered the American ping pong team to be invited to China. That was actually the start of diplomatic relations between the US and China in 1971. It was the last minute possible when he was falling asleep. He said to his nurse, make sure you get that US ping pong team invited to China. The nurse was like, I'm not doing that. You're under the influence of sleeping pills. And he's like, why haven't you done it yet? And I suppose there's some point where one of the world's most powerful tyrants is bellowing at you to do something that you ignore their previous instructions when they're acting under the influence of sleeping pills. Now, I don't know if there's any similar protocol in place in the White House. Like, is there any instruction about these are the times that you don't listen to the president? I mean, I doubt that Biden himself would issue those instructions in the way that Mao did, but this is the territory we're beginning to get into, and if we're thinking about this, then marginal voters are thinking about this as well.
Yeah,
because they. Obviously, the way that we talk and think about politics is not always the same that marginal voters do, but one of the most favourite popular things for people to think about in presidential elections is some kind of nuclear catastrophe scenario, right? Some kind of, you've got 10 minutes to make the decision. These are the things that they're thinking about.
Yep.
There is a heritage in the White House of ignoring the president when he says crazy stuff.
Well, that heritage goes back 4 years.
So Nixon is a good example of this.
Yep.
Where, Nixon might be blowing off steam and say to Kissinger, I want to drop an atomic bomb on Hanoi. And Kissinger would be like, well, I don't think we should do that.
Yeah.
And he would say, I want you to find out about it. And Kissinger would say, okay, see you tomorrow. And then he would never bring it up again, right?
Find out about it.
There are examples, especially in military scenarios, where people get their blood up, they say silly things, and then they will, ring up. Nixon himself would do this, would kind of ring up the next morning and say, it's like the mafia hit. Don't worry about that thing. What do you do when the entire presidency has to be conducted this way?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, let's find out. Few correspondences. Aaron says, regarding the funding issue that was brought up, this is that Harris having control of the funding.
Oh, right, yeah.
If Biden drops out.
Yeah.
Could you not just replace Biden and keep Harris as VP? Have someone else come over the top? I realize that would still be difficult to pull off for other reasons. But but theoretically.
Yeah.
Do you have any answer to that, though?
Just look, the broader answer is I think that it would be very difficult for anyone other than Harris to be the replacement. And first of all, the easiest kind, if Biden were to agree to go, I think it would be on the condition of some bargain being struck that would make Harris the presumptive nominee. Partly because, as we have seen over the last few days, Biden's strongest support base in the party remains older black lawmakers and older black voters. That she would be the candidate that they would want. I think that Biden would see it as a slight on himself if someone else was the replacement. That to me seems like the mechanism would be there basically for him to tell his delegates at the convention, you're voting for Harris now. I don't know if all of them would, but that would be to me that's the simplest thing. The polling also suggests that she's the only candidate who's anywhere near Biden in terms of matching up against Trump. Now, caveat on that is that's because the other candidates are still unknown to half the population.
Yeah.
I think the way they poll is generally a direct function of how well known they are. If they became the candidate, the story would probably change. In the same way that I think Harris's polling would probably improve if she were the candidate. I don't see Harris standing for a scenario where she remains vice president and someone else comes in over the top. I also see that as completely pointless because she's been quite an unpopular vice president.
Yeah. Look, I mean, presumably Aaron's thinking just about the money.
Okay, right.
Look, to be honest, Aaron, I don't know the answer to that question. I could probably see a way you could finagle it, but I'm not 100% sure. It seems quite tricky.
Sorry, I was completely missing the point of that question.
Yeah. He's thinking about the money. I mean, I think Aaron is like you said, he realizes it'd still be difficult to pull off for other reasons.
Yeah, okay.
But yes, I think you might be able to do that, Aaron. You might. I'm not sure. Richard?
Yeah, look, even if you can do it in a technical sense, I think any election strategy which relies on the old switcho changeo is going to be very hard to pull off.
Yeah, it would make the Democrats once again the party of chaos, which is even more so, which I don't think is what they want to be right now when they're running against Trump. Question from Adrian regarding Lichtman's keys.
Oh, Jesus, we're still doing this shit.
Lichtman's been all over the place. He's been loving this. He's Biden's biggest supporter because of his keys. It seems clear to me that Biden's mental decline now qualifies as a scandal. Both sides of politics are acknowledging this. He's therefore lost another key. Based on this, an orderly handover to Kamala Harris with Biden resigning the presidency before the election is potentially the better option. Lichtman now says that this would give her the incumbency and contest keys. It would also give her the scandal key, putting her in a better position than Biden. That's quite clever, Adrian. I do think that Lichtman's whole methodology is just garbage, though, so I don't really care.
Yeah.
Having said that, remember, I know you're comparing Biden to Harris with Lichtman's keys there, Adrian, but according to Lichtman, Biden is ahead by more than one key. So him gaining the scandal key shouldn't make him any less than the favourite. He should still be the favourite.
We may as well be talking. How are they doing with Art Garfunkel's Trail of Breadcrumbs?
Yeah.
Everyone loves Lichtman.
Are we talking about US politics here, or is this a strategy to win at Elden Ring?
Well, I think when we're talking about keys this much, when talking about American presidents, I start to get a little bit nervous and thinking about what Trump would be doing with all these keys. Anyway, thank you, Adrian. I just wanted to answer your question. Yes. Okay, so a couple other things. Oh, we haven't mentioned the Parkinson's thing yet, which was a pretty big deal. So we should probably get into that.
The president has Parkinson's disease is, not even on page 5 at the moment.
Yeah, that's right. So, okay. So do one of you guys want to take this or do you want me to start?
You start.
Yeah. Okay. All right.
Oh no, unless
Richie.
No, I mean,
sorry, I'm not used to
the
this.
three-way. I'll tell you.
Used to this three-person dynamic.
This TriPodcast thing, it's really changing things up, isn't
The
it?
TriPodcast.
it's going to take us some time to figure out how to deal with this new paradigm.
And then we'll smash it again. That's what we do. Okay. On Saturday morning, the New York Post reports that Kevin Kennard, who was a Parkinson's disease expert at Walter Reed Medical Center, met with Biden's personal doctor, Kevin O'Connor, who's a bit of a friend of the family, so people don't entirely trust what Kevin O'Connor has to say, at the White House in January. Now, that a little bit after that same day, Alex Berenson, who is a bit of a Twitter fave, he noted that Kennard had made more than a half dozen visits to the White House in the past year. I believe he called that information urgent in all caps. The next day, New York Times ran with it, and they put it at 8 times in 8 months that Kennard had visited the White House from August 2023 to March 2024. There was, so the question was, what was this Parkinson's expert doing at the White House 8 times in 8 months? Now, we should just say, right off the bat, the media should have known, the New York Times should have known this was a beat-up. There were facts out there in the public that were obvious even then, which was that Biden wasn't even in the White House for 3 of Kennard's recorded visits. Like, he was somewhere else. Number one. Number two, Biden's physical this year, the results explicitly mentioned a test for these kinds of diseases, and said specifically that they consulted a movement disorder specialist for both those issues and for Biden's gait, and who was presumably Kennard, and they found no trace of Parkinson's disease. And also explain why he's there, because he's there for the physical.
Mm-hmm.
That makes sense, right? Kennard also, they should have known, is the neurologist for the entire White House medical unit.
That's right.
Which involves thousands of ex-military people, for a start. He visited 64 times between 2012 and 2016. So 8 times in 8 months, pretty much on schedule for the kind of visits which he'd done in the past. Why did I say 2012 through 2016? What happened between 2017 and 2020? I'll tell you what happened. Trump didn't release his records of who visited him at the White House. So we should just bear that in mind. Like, we have no idea what happened during the Trump White House. Okay, but anyway, so it was clear it was a beat-up, but they went hard with it. Anyway, I'm going to play a frenetic press conference coming up in a second. But then the White House, in response to the frenetic press conference, released a letter. And the letter said, quote, Dr. Kennard was the neurological specialist that examined President Biden for each of his annual physicals, just confirming what we already knew. Yep. His findings have been made public each time I've released the results of the president's annual physical. President Biden has not seen a neurologist outside of his annual physical. And this was the finding. An extremely detailed neurologic exam was again reassuring in that there were no findings which would be consistent with any cerebellar or other central neurological disorder such as stroke, multiple sclerosis, Parkinson's, or ascending lateral sclerosis, nor are there any signs of cervical myelopathy. This exam did again support a finding of peripheral neuropathy in both feet. No motor weakness was detected. He exhibits no tremor, either at rest or with activity. He demonstrates excellent fine motor dexterity, but a subtle difference in heat/cold sensation could be elicited as it was last year. This heat-cold sensation deficit was detected a couple of inches higher on his ankle calf this year, which is not unexpected. There may in fact be day-to-day subjective variation of these findings as during last year's exam. So, in other words, taste the back of my hand. It's a very.
I didn't realize this would be such a slap fest.
Well, we're all here tasting the backs of each other's hands. Democracy is collapsing, Chaz.
Well, democracy is tasting the back of Biden's hand. Anyway, okay. So at least if you believe the doctor's letter, then there's nothing to worry about, and that would be quite a lie if that was not true.
Mm-hmm.
But his last checkup was in February, so that does leave open whether he should have more cognitive tests, which we've already been talking about. and they should be obviously released to the public.
Yep.
Sanjay Gupta's had a bit to say about this. He said, over the past week, I received more than a dozen calls, texts, and emails from medical colleagues who, like me, specialise in the brain. It wasn't that what we noticed was necessarily new, but that it was particularly pronounced, and right from the start of the debate. From a neurological standpoint, we were concerned with Biden's confused rambling, sudden loss of concentration in the middle of a sentence. Yes, I know. Halting speech and absence of facial animation, resulting at times in a flat, open mouth expression. To be clear, these are only observations, not in any way diagnostic of something deeper, and none of these doctors wish to suggest that was the case. The consensus from the doctors reaching out to me, however, was the president should be encouraged to undergo detailed cognitive and movement disorder testing, and those results should be made available to the public. Then on NBC, this dude showed up, Dr. Tom Pitts.
I love these guys.
This is what he had to say.
What you've seen from the president over the last 2 years, what you saw at the debate, the last few interviews, the way he speaks, the way maybe he walks, have you noticed anything that gives you a red flag as a doctor?
Oh, yeah, I see him 20 times a day in clinic. I mean, it's ironic because he has just such classic features of neurodegeneration. I mean, word finding difficulties, and that's not, I couldn't find the word. That's from degeneration of the word retrieval area.
He's also overcome stuttering, though. Could that be part of that, too?
No, this is not a palatal issue or a speech discrepancy, which is very different from a lemino dysfunction, actual word retrieval, where you pick a similar question or talk around the issue, plus the rigidity, monotone voice.
Wait, go back to that, the rigidity. What do you mean?
Rigidity, loss of arm swing, standing up lordotically. You notice when he turns, it's kind of end block turning. It's not a quick turn. So that's one of the hallmarks of Parkinsonism is rigidity and bradykinesia, slow movement. And he has that hallmark, especially with the low voice that said was a cold hypophonia. A small monotone voice like this over time is a hallmark of Parkinsonism. I could have diagnosed him from across the mall. This guy is not a hard case.
But I've had relatives who have gone through neurological issues, and I've heard that sometimes Parkinson's is not very easy to nail. You have to take a lot of tests.
It's early on. If you're just presented with like hallucinations, that could be a variety of things, or just the cognitive problems. That could be Alzheimer's versus Parkinsonism, and that becomes a little nebulous. But once you start manifesting the hallmark motor symptoms,
right?
Slow movement, rigidity, mass facies, hypophonia. I mean, if a med student did not pick Parkinson's on the test, they'd be remediated.
So let me ask.
So he's not holding back.
No. Tom Pitts is not holding back.
No. And then the Peppers have been involved as well. Penelope wrote, I live with a neurologist who specializes in movement disorders. He's been saying for a while now that Joe Biden has Parkinson's disease. Pseudonym, Dr. Pseudonym, our very favorite pod doctor, has been a lot more careful.
Yeah.
And this is why I actually I rate what Dr. Pseudonym has to say.
Okay, yes.
Unlike Tom Pitts. Not a neurologist or a geriatrician, and going to follow the Goldwater rule strictly here. What she means by that is that you don't diagnose from afar, the president. But also pointing out that the official letter regarding Biden's health is in the public domain. It has been acknowledged that he uses a CPAP machine to treat obstructive sleep apnea, and he is also under treatment for atrial fibrillation. His somewhat stiff gait is attributed to osteoarthritis, including degenerative change to parts of the spinal column. Even in the absence of movement disorders such as Parkinson's disease, all of the above can present relatively significant burdens of disease depending on underlying physical conditions. No information regarding cognitive testing appears in the official transcript at this stage. Cognitive and capacity assessment can take several consultations. Sometimes people have quite astonishing levels of ability to keep up superficially normal conversation, even while their underlying cognitive function is impaired, which I think is a really good point. Even if he doesn't have anything, just the symptoms alone are a problem.
Yep.
I also use a CPAP machine. Hate the fucking thing.
But do you have the rest of them?
I do not have the rest of them. No, I haven't collected the rest of the keys. Maybe one day I'll get there.
You're not going to be the president of invalids. Yes.
Unlike Dr. Dave, I don't use the CPAP machine, and I'm not a doctor.
Yeah.
But one thing that is noteworthy about Biden is that his facial expression has changed in the last few months. And that is, Dr. Tom there did reference something which is called mask-like visage, which is a hallmark of Parkinson's disease. And apart from with delight when they're talking to you, Chaz, people's facial expression their default facial expression doesn't just change in that way.
It's true.
It's quite noticeable.
Yeah.
Well, look. Honestly, this section here is not meant to be diagnosing him. I'm not going to make the.
This is not Diagnosis Corner.
No, it's definitely not. But all I'm saying is,
I was told it was Diagnosis Corner.
All I'm saying is that people who know what they're talking about are all unified on one thing, which is he should get those bloody tests and he should be released to the public.
Mm.
I
agree.
And if he doesn't, they're going to keep on calling for it.
Yeah.
That's not going to stop. So anyway, okay. So we got in this area, like of just Biden stuff, Biden versus Democrats, all this kind of stuff. Do you guys have any other thoughts in general?
Yeah, I mean, what you hear from internal sources is that the Biden family plays a big role in this.
Yes.
And that, this is very typical of people who've been in politics for a long time. The kind of imprinting event happened a really long time ago. The sort of us against the world mentality came from this period in the 1980s where Biden was being picked as a possible future presidential candidate and was derailed by media attention to his plagiarism. Is that right, Chaz? Is that right, Dave?
Yes,
That's right.
Yes,
Yeah.
it was 988.
That's
yeah.
right.
Yeah.
And another Trumpian aspect of this is humiliation by the media and revenge. There is a vendetta element to this continuation beyond the time should have been called.
Well, he also has an origin story of being teased for his stutter when he was a kid as well. So that humiliation aspect is related to that as well. But I went to humiliation by the media. I did tease that there was an absolute clusterfuck of a press conference earlier this week about the Parkinson's thing. I won't subject these guys to it, but I'll play for the Peppers. I'll play you a minute and a half of it, 2 minutes of it. You'll get the tone of it pretty quickly.
It's a very basic, direct question.
Wait. Hold on. Wait a second.
Eight times, or at least once, in regards to the president specifically.
Hold on a second.
That's what you should be able to answer by this point.
Wait, no. No, wait a minute. Ed, please. A little respect here, please. So every year, around the president's physical examination, he sees a neurologist. That's 3 times, right? So I am telling you that he has seen a neurologist 3 times while he has been in this presidency. That's what I'm saying. I am telling you that he has seen them 3 times. That is what I'm sharing with you, right? So every time he has a physical, he has had to see a neurologist. So that is answering that question.
No, it's not.
No, it is. It is. You're
Dr.
asking
Kevin
me.
Kennard, come to the White House
But I
specifically about
also
the
said to you,
president's condition.
Ed, I also said to you, for security reasons, we cannot share names. We cannot share names.
You cannot
We
share
have to.
names
We have
of
to.
others he would have met with.
We
but
cannot.
You can share names in regards to if someone came here in regards to
we
the
cannot
president.
share. We cannot share names of specialists broadly, from a dermatologist to a neurologist. We cannot share names. There are security reasons. We have to. We have to protect. I understand that. I hear
It's
you.
right there for anyone to see.
Ed, I hear you. I cannot from here confirm any of that because we have to keep their privacy. I think they would appreciate that too. We have to give them.
The doctor.
We have to keep their privacy.
It is public information.
I
It is
hear you.
listed that he went to
and
you're going to allow this to
guys,
fester
guys,
longer, Karine,
guys,
unless the White House
guys,
answers the
hold on a second. There's no reason to go back and forth and be in this aggressive way.
Miffed around here about how information's been shared with the press corps about him.
And it's just indicative of what he's got ahead of him if he doesn't deal with the questions, because the media are pissed off. They feel like they've been lied to.
Yep.
And now they're looking for payback.
Yes.
It's so obvious.
Yeah. Yeah.
They're really precious about it.
Yeah, they are. And they're upset by people saying that they should have figured this out before.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Totally.
And what they've got to go on is, well, we were lied to.
Yeah. Okay. So my question then for you guys is about the groups that are from the Democrats on either side, who are the groups who are supporting him versus the groups who are opposing him, because there are actually some trends here. And I'll be interested in your views about these trends. Okay, so there were let's see. I think the last count I saw was 10 Democrats who had either publicly called on Biden to drop out or reportedly done so in a private meeting.
It's up to 11.
It's up to 11 now. So that's why you said there was one more today.
Yeah.
And 37 had expressed concerns about Biden as the nominee, but they stopped short of saying he should drop out.
Yeah.
By contrast, there were 89 who had made public statements supporting Biden. Okay, so out of the group, this is the first 10.
Yep.
Actually, no, this is the first 37. Sorry. They're more moderate than average. They come from swing states. 13 of the 37 represent places that Biden lost in 2020 or won by fewer than 10 percentage points. By contrast, the group sticking with him are more progressive than average. Their states and districts on average voted for Biden by 36 points in 2020. And they're more diverse, only 38% white. 37 black senators and representatives have come out in support of Biden. Only one black Democrat has even expressed concerns about Biden's candidacy. So why do we think this is?
Part of it is going to be what they're hearing from constituents.
Yep.
I think this is underrated as it's one of the few areas where US democracy still works pretty well. Staffers are hearing people from people on the phones. They're reading emails. And in districts where people tend to talk to their local representative, you'll have a reasonable indication of what people in your electorate think you should do. They are still listening to that. Also, from a game theory point of view, rather, this is what you'd anticipate, which is that weak bidders fold first.
Yes.
You know, that people with less to lose are the ones who are willing to put themselves out there. They're sort of far away from the centers of democratic power anyway.
Yeah.
So it's playing out as expected. The trouble is that it's not just a collective action problem. It doesn't matter if every single Democrat calls on him to pull out of the race. There's no mechanism at the end of that. There's no. This is not put to a vote. People are tallying like this. It's a ballot, but it's not.
Yeah, he needs to step down. I think another problem that you did mention as well is they've got a bit of a Republican referendum problem here in that there are two different models of what to do if he goes. The Kamala Harris model and the Blitz primary model.
Blitz
Let's
primary
go.
is an insane fantasy.
It's a ridiculous fantasy.
Yeah.
But it's out there. And
well, that seemed to be what George Clooney was suggesting yesterday.
Yeah. So, we'll get to Clooney in a sec.
Yeah.
But the Blitz primary of literally getting Taylor Swift to moderate a debate. Literally, that was in the proposal. It was ridiculous. I mean, actually, to be fair, I think in the official proposal they said Obama or Clinton. Other people said Taylor Swift. I just need to get that right because I don't want to malign them, but still stupid. And that's never going to happen. But the fact is, it's out there. Yeah. And when you have two possible options, the conservative option can play the two off each other, which is why I say it's a Republican referendum model from the Australian Republican referendum there.
Yeah.
The other thing I would say, Rich, about I agree with what you said about the seats, but I would also say that I think it's not a surprise that moderates are trying to distance themselves from the Democrat president.
Yeah.
Because they're trying to appeal to independent voters.
Yeah.
And the Democrat president isn't very popular. So that makes sense. And it also makes sense that the people in progressive districts aren't worried about their general election. They're worried about their primary in the future. And so they don't want to be the person who backstabbed the Democratic candidate. So I think that does make sense for that reason as well. Okay, I've got two other areas I want to ask you guys about. First is Biden's tactic, which we haven't really talked about, the pro-democracy thing.
Yep.
I want to ask you about whether there's anything to the democracy angle. So first of all, I'll read his letter.
Yep.
They sent out to the Democrats.
Are you going to do it in his voice?
No. Do one of you guys do a Biden?
No.
If we do a Biden impersonation, we can't read out the letter.
No one will understand it, that's for sure. We don't have the time to read out this letter with a Biden impersonation because he goes so slowly. We're a democratic nomination process and the voters have spoken clearly and decisively. I received over 14 million votes, 87% of the votes cast across the entire nominating process. I've nearly 3,900 delegates, making me the presumptive nominee of our party by a wide margin. This was a process open to anyone who wanted to run. Only 3 people chose to challenge me. One fared so badly that he left the primaries to run as an independent. Another attacked me for being too old and was soundly defeated. The voters of the Democratic Party have voted. They've chosen me to be the nominee of the party. Do we now just say this process didn't matter? That the voters don't have a say? I decline to do that. I feel a deep obligation to the faith and trust the voters of the Democratic Party have placed in me to run this year. It was their decision to make, not the press, not the pundits, not the big donors, not any selected group of individuals, no matter how well-intentioned. The voters, and the voters alone, decide the nominee of the Democratic Party. How can we stand for democracy in our nation if we ignore it in our own party? I cannot do that. I will not do that. The question of how to move forward has been well aired for over a week now, and it's time for it to end. Oh my God, I was getting so inspired by that rhetoric.
I would say that was an electric performance, but you would have jumped out of your seat if it was. This is what happens when people start to get very hazy ideas about democracy in a panic. You know, they start talking about stuff like Taylor Swift moderating the debate at a Blitz primary, which is a ridiculous idea. It should be Billie Eilish. She will bring a kind of low-key coffee on the beach vibe to make them all chill.
We've had Peppers ask about this. Dave, I'll throw this to you.
Okay.
Moradai and also Tonko369 also said the same thing basically, which was, personally, I don't find the idea of a few thousand delegates picking a candidate any less democratic than having primary voters choose the candidate. Neither is representative of all Americans, and no matter who's selected as a candidate, they need to face a general election. In Australia, just a handful of elected MPs choose a leader at any time, including when they're in government. And the idea is the Democratic Party is the vote at the end, not the nomination.
Look, that's a very good point. And it's worth remembering that as a universal method of selecting candidates, primaries have only been around for about 50 years. There are a lot of problems with the way that primaries are conducted. They're conducted differently in every state. Every year we see increasing shitfights between the states about primaries. It's very well known that the early primaries are the ones that really count. Frequently, more than half of the primaries that take place, like 3/4 of primaries in some cases, just don't matter at all because the result's already been decided. Most people have pulled out. With primaries, you're looking at something where the first primary might have 6 viable contestants in it. By the time you get to the end, it's 1 with, maybe some no-hoper left in place. It doesn't have the same kind of democratic consistency that you have in an actual general election. It's also not some sacred thing. It was the idea of universal primary. So this came from the Fraser-McGovern reforms after the riots at the Democratic Convention in 1968, where something did need to be done to make the process more democratic when you had all of these anti-war Democratic rank and file people getting locked out of this convention, which chose a pro-war Democrat and with a pro-war Democratic mayor then setting the troops on the people outside. Clearly you want to avoid that kind of situation, but a primary is not a flawless or sacred way of doing it, especially a primary like this, where there was no contest.
Yes.
Like Dean Phillips and Marianne Williams, it wasn't a contest because everyone was so convinced that it was so important not to weaken Biden's candidacy in any way because he, after he made the ego-driven decision last year to run again, he basically ensured that there wouldn't be a contest. Biden is now taking advantage of essentially the party loyalty that he imposed on everybody by making the decision to run again. I don't see anything undemocratic now about replacing him, especially if he's the one who takes the decision to step aside.
By the way, as evidence for what you just said about the primary being a joke and that was not representative of the people's views.
Yeah.
There was a CNN poll in September 2023.
Yes.
Where 33% of Democrats said they wanted Biden as a nominee. They didn't want him.
Yeah.
They had no other choice.
Yes.
And also, as a little aside, it was a rigged primary, not just in terms of the people in it,
Yeah.
but also in terms of the information voters had.
Yes.
The relevant information was about Biden being a doddery old fool, which sure, they had a bit of a clue about.
Yeah.
There were the clues, but all the information we're now getting, they did not have.
Yes.
So it wasn't a real vote, even with the flawed candidates. And by the way, this is not a small thing.
Yeah.
Biden refused the debate.
Yeah.
The most important information, as it turns out, is that Biden can't conduct a debate. So even if it was up against Dean Phillips, that would have given very valuable information. He refused that information, and now he's standing by the result like it's sacrosanct. That's bullshit.
Fuck, this reminds me. I've got to actually concede what had been my most cherished point of disagreement with you.
The Peppers already onto this.
Okay. Well, this is a big mea culpa. Okay, I concede now that debates are actually useful in some way. I didn't realise how dramatically useful this one was going to be, but yeah, you're right. Okay, they either have to have a debate or a cognitive test.
I was getting ready to put on nitrile gloves like a UFC referee then to adjudicate your disagreement, and you just ended by agreeing with him.
No, this is the thing. Up until 2 weeks ago, I've been adamant that we shouldn't even have debates.
Yeah.
I hate them. I try to avoid watching them. I have believed up until this point that they never add anything useful. Okay, this one added something useful. I will concede that
What
point.
makes Biden's line that it's undemocratic particularly unpersuasive? Let's push aside Tay-Tay at the Blitz convention for a minute.
Yeah.
He's just talking about resigning being undemocratic. The person replacing him received the same number of votes as him on a joint ticket.
That's correct.
They specifically voted for Kamala Harris to replace him in a circumstance in which he could not continue as president. What would be undemocratic about that coming to pass?
After he'd specifically campaigned on stepping down as being a transition president.
Yeah.
So absolutely. Okay, this might be the final talking point. There might be one more. We'll see. Next talking point I want to ask you guys thoughts on is the Clooney op-ed.
Yeah.
Okay, because this is an interesting development. I'll read the relevant bit about it. The Joe Biden I was with 3 weeks ago at the fundraiser was not the Joe big effing deal Biden of 2010. He wasn't even the Joe Biden of 2020. He was the same man we all witnessed at the debate. Was he tired? Yes. A cold? Maybe. But our party leaders need to stop telling us that 51 million people didn't see what we just saw. We are not going to win in November with this president. On top of that, we won't win the House. We're going to lose the Senate. This isn't only my opinion. This is the opinion of every senator and Congress member and governor that I've spoken with in private. Every single one, irrespective of what he or she is saying publicly. Now, what I want to ask you guys about, I don't know which one will go first, but I found that last paragraph very revealing. That the Democrats, when they were out of options and they thought, we can't convince this guy to step down, just recruited George Clooney to assassinate Biden for them. Like, they clearly were lining up, wording up George Clooney about their thoughts to get him to take out Joe Biden. Now, I find that a really interesting development. I wonder what your thoughts are on that.
Dr. Dave.
So a lot of people have been busting out Timur Kuran's book from 1995, Private Truths, Public Lies, to talk about preference falsification. Now, I think they've stretched this book too far, which I remember reading it in grad school. Timur Kuran is really talking about a situation where people don't even privately disclose their opinions to each other in authoritarian regimes. And when people don't privately disclose their opinions to each other, when you suddenly have a shock where you suddenly realize how many people agree with you, that's when you get these sudden revolutions happening. Now, the reason why that doesn't quite describe this situation is because clearly people have been sharing their private concerns with each other. And the shock has just been that it's brought all of this out into the open. Everybody already knows how many other people are actually feel the same way that they do. They don't disagree over that. What they've got at this point, I think, is a major kind of tactical disagreement about what the costs are with persisting with Biden, given that given that they have to rely on him to step aside, versus the costs on continuing to mount the pressure. So I think that So what's going on? With Clooney here, is making all of this that they've already been privately disclosing to each other as public as possible. I don't know if he's been talking to John Fetterman. I think John Fetterman is sincerely behind Trump.
Oh, I think he's...
John Fetterman he will be the last one to go down. But I don't know if he's been publicly recruited or whether George Clooney's just figured this out on his own.
I reckon he's been recruited.
You reckon he's been recruited?
I reckon he has.
But he's definitely doing that job of saying privately, we all know. So it fits a little bit into the Timor Quran framework, but not as much as it's been stretched.
Yeah, I mean, I think that you're right that in those sorts of terms, they are looking for a catalyst for what's called a preference cascade.
Yes.
Is that right?
Yeah.
They're looking to have someone who is a very persuasive figure.
Yeah.
And it's not a surprise that they've chosen someone who is kind of an extra political figure. It might also be the case that they are thinking about an audience of one, right? They are thinking about Joe Biden reading this piece or having it read to him. And you do start to think, okay, well, if he's not listening to anybody apart from his family, who is someone he might listen to? And you either deploy a Hollywood heartthrob in this way, or you try and find out if Corn Pop is still alive.
That's what they need Corn Pop's intervention. I'm sure they recruited him, and the reason why is because it's just too coincidental that this came out. Think about it. You have to write it the day before it came out, right? At the latest. The day before was when pretty much everyone gave up.
So who do you think is the spy master here?
I don't know.
Any guesses?
No, I've got no guesses. I got no guess. I'm sorry. But I've got no idea. But it just seems too coincidental that the day after everyone was going, shit, we've run out of bullets. That's when George Clooney pulls out his op-ed. You just think, it's some politician tapped him on the shoulder.
This is purely speculative. I'll preface it with that. My guess would be Pelosi.
Maybe. Look, this did come on the same day Pelosi pulled the trigger as well.
Yeah, I don't think that's a coincidence. And also, they're on the same coast, right?
Yeah, they are. That's true. Yeah, it could be. Just while we're talking about this, an interesting little aside, there was John Favreau from Pod Save America was interviewed about this because he was at the same fundraiser that Clooney was at.
I mean, it was not surprising to any of us who were at the fundraiser. I was there. Clooney was exactly right. And every single person I talked to at the fundraiser thought the same thing, except for the people working for Joe Biden, or at least they didn't say that. But I remember my wife, Emily, turned to me after the fundraiser and said, what are we going to do? I mean, and I said, well, there's a debate in a week. Either he'll do well in the debate and we'll think, well, he was just tired because he flew all the way back from Europe and that'll be that. Or he'll be like this at the debate and then the whole country will be talking about it. And so here we are.
This is what I find so fascinating. It is that not only were they all thinking the same thing, they all knew that that's what each other were thinking. Yeah, it's pretty fascinating.
Yeah, I find it a really interesting insight into the mindset where what he was thinking. I'm sure this is, for those who think, it's all just a conspiracy and everyone knew he was an invalid, but they just wanted to hush it up until they're exposed, all this kind of stuff. Like, you can see his self-doubt.
Yes.
Like, he's trying to self-doubt going, well, is it maybe, I mean, like, he looks bad, but is it maybe because he's tired?
Yeah.
Like, you can just see that, it's been a long descent, which I think you described before, Rich. There's a very wide spectrum of old person behavior.
Yes.
And and when you see a little bit, you go, well, that's not great, but you start making excuses in your head. You go, well, maybe this, maybe that, maybe that. Am I the person to speak up about this? There's people who know him a lot better than me.
Yeah.
Surely they would speak up if he's that bad. You
Yeah.
know, and you start making excuses, and it's just, and you can see how they just kept on along this road until you got to the point where there was a demonstration where no one can deny. We're all watching exactly the same thing at the same time, and every single person watching it is going, he's done. Like, until you get that moment, there's just too much self-doubt to make a big call. So I think that was revealing.
That is an Emperor's New Clothes scenario that you're describing there.
Yeah.
Where everyone can see it but can't say it.
Yeah, that's a good one. Okay, just a couple of... unless you have anything else, we'll leave this topic after a couple more correspondences. Doug says, can you please discuss why the Democrats didn't read the Riot Act 4 years ago to Biden about the second term? What clout does the party have in this regard? Biden at 77 to 81 years old is one thing. How could they possibly sell him at 81 to 85? And this is just a weak political parties thing, isn't it, guys?
It's important to remember the Democratic Party doesn't actually exist in the sense that we understand the existence of political parties in places like Australia or the United Kingdom. E.E. Schatzschneider was right when he pointed out the National Party only comes into existence once every 4 years, and that is at the roll call to announce the candidate. Other than that, it's a collection of state and local organisations. Yes, there is a Democratic National Committee, but it's not super powerful or all powerful. Things like major clusters of donors are more powerful than anything in the party. Certainly, within the legislative party, you can get powerful people and you can get powerful blocks of people within the legislative party, but there is no party that can read him the Riot Act. Once they made him their candidate 4 years ago, they were making him the de facto leader of the Democratic Party. That's it.
Yeah, I mean, the Matt Iglesias way of saying this is when you call the Democrats, nobody picks up the phone. And there's a lot of truth to that.
That was literally for you when you called the Democrats in Florida.
I was just about to talk about this.
Yes,
I mean,
right.
I was just about to
Tell us
talk
about
about this. So, I mean, I have called the Democrats on the phone to ask them for comment about a really deracinated political party campaigning on the ground that I found. I think I've spoken about this a little bit before online. I'll just mention it again briefly. So I went to a very contentious seat and just tried to do something really simple, which is find out where the Democratic candidate was speaking. The Republican...
In Florida, yeah?
In Florida, in Miami-Dade. It took me about an hour to find out where the Republican candidate was speaking. And for the Democratic candidate, it took me something like 5 days.
Wow.
I started physically going around to these campaign offices and being shocked that nobody there had any idea what was going on. They hadn't had instructions. They had no clue how to deal with media. Some of them got the names of their own candidates wrong. It was an absolutely shambolic operation to the extent that a media representative actually said to me in one of the offices, "Oh, we're not very organised and I'm not here all the time." I mean, these are on-record comments to a reporter sitting in her office.
How long was this before the election?
I was very close, so this was only a few weeks out, I think.
Okay.
This was every flashing red light you can imagine about a dysfunctional organisation. Not just one of the most dysfunctional political parties I've ever seen, but one of the most dysfunctional organisations of any kind I've ever seen. In what is supposed to be this, emergency election to stop Trumpism we've talked about before. This is the midterms, by the way.
Yeah.
So when I called, the head honcho guy in Washington and started asking about this, his reaction was very interesting. It was to get extremely angry with me. It was to insist that, even though he was miles and miles away, that what I was saying was not the case. They were all over it. These things, not just that they hadn't happened, but what he said was, what he implied was that I thought I was some hotshot foreign correspondent expecting a red carpet treatment. And when a confused old lady opened the door to me, I was personally insulted. Now, I was personally fascinated that, you know, there was nobody home. But he never really got over that anger. You know, he you know, yelled at me a lot, and he never took the time to go, someone is giving me important information. Someone is telling me about something that I can't see that they can, and I'm going to shoot the messenger stone dead. Yeah. And I think part of the reason why was this, you know, I'm a bit skeptical about the term Trump derangement syndrome. But I think for a lot of people in the Democratic Party, it became this organizing principle for everything.
Yeah.
And the moment someone said to them, I think you're going to lose, I think this is a mistake, I think, you know, you look weak compared to him, they got very, very upset. And the one thing that Biden did, and that he's been rewarded from, you know, in every personal or emotional sense you can imagine, is that he defeated Trump.
Yeah.
And I think the moment that he did that, the talk about the transition presidency was all forgotten.
Yes.
And the people that were worried about it were like me in Florida. Their view was not welcome, and it was ignored until it was too late.
Yeah.
Okay, I feel like we should move on to Trump because we have talked enough about Biden, I reckon, unless you guys have more to say. Let's have a little toilet break because we're about to talk about Trump, and we've mentioned Taylor Swift at one point in time. I had this clip just floating around that I wasn't going to play, but I've just pulled it up because I reckon this is a beauty. Here we go. This is Trump talking about Taylor Swift, and I'd like to warn you, if you have people in the room who have a weak stomach, you might want to leave the room briefly because you might end up painting the walls.
What do you think about Taylor Swift? One of the most famous people right now.
Yeah, I think she's beautiful, very beautiful. I find her very beautiful. I think she's liberal. She probably doesn't like Trump, but I hear she's very talented. But I think she's very beautiful, actually. Unusually beautiful.
So Trump wants to root Taylor Swift, and now you got that image in your head. I'm glad there's a toilet break so you can evacuate your bowels after hearing that. We'll now move on to the Trump campaign. There's been a lot of talk in the last few weeks about Project 2025. For those who don't know what it is, this is Heritage Foundation they do this all the time. This is not new.
Yes, no,
they've been doing this for decades. They've been releasing mandate for leaderships, which are reports to try and influence Republican presidential administrations. For some reason, this one's really cut through, possibly because Trump's such a policy-free zone himself. But also, I think it's because it's 922 pages, so anyone can pretend they know what's in it when they don't.
Yeah.
Because no one's going to read it. But John Oliver, the Democrats have been trying to make something out of this for a few months without success. John Oliver did a whole episode on it, which I think got some attention for it. And then sadly, the way our society works, that didn't get the attention that Taraji Henson got at the BET Awards.
I need y'all to listen. Show up and show out when it's time to vote, because it's not just about the presidential election, you guys. It's time for us to play chess, not checkers. It's about making decisions that will affect us as human beings, our careers, our next generations to come. Did you know that it is now a crime to be homeless? Pay attention. It's not a secret. Look it up. They are attacking our most vulnerable citizens. The Project 2025 plan is not a game. Look it up. They are trying to bring the draft back. Who do you think they're going to draft first? I'm not trying to scare us. I'm trying to inform us. We got 3 Supreme Court seats up, you guys. We need those seats, or we have no protection.
People did look it up. They looked it up in a big way as a result of that. And I know she's trying to inform people, but homelessness is not a crime. The Supreme Court decision that allowed people to make homelessness a crime in their particular locality has nothing to do with Project 2025.
But that was before she mentioned Project 2025.
They're not trying to bring the draft back.
I think that the homelessness is now a crime. Look, it was a simplified summary
It was.
of what is now happening as a result of a Supreme Court decision.
And there aren't 3 Supreme Court seats up for grabs either. But anyway, let's leave that aside.
Yeah.
Dave, talk to us about Project 2025.
Okay, so as you said, it's a Heritage Foundation project, although a lot of other fairly scummy organisations have also put their names to it as well. And the Project 2025 report has a lot of different co-authors. Now, as you said, Heritage Foundation does this before every election. Their most successful example was Mandate for Leadership in 1980, where they proudly boast that 60% of the policy recommendations were adopted by the Reagan administration. I don't think that was a 922-page document, though. The view within the Heritage Foundation is that Reagan conservatives then lost their way, right? They became stuck in time, and now this is the updated version, or the updated version of that vision. I got to say, it's a very, very single-minded vision, and that is we need to defeat the left. That is the entire thing. That there's something called the left that apparently controls everything both domestically and internationally, and we need to defeat it. Now, the big centerpiece of it, which is it's an idea that has already come up in the last Trump administration, which is using Schedule F to sack tens of thousands of public servants and replace them with political appointees. So normally there are about 4,000 political appointees that a president makes. This would expand that number to 50,000, and because there's all of this mythology about the last Trump administration being undone by disloyal people who were improperly vetted, they've got this idea that there'll be this conservative version of LinkedIn that will bring in all of these recruits who are primed and vetted and ready to go. So that's one of the major pillars of this is personnel. So in terms of actual policy proposals, some of it is very, very in sync with stuff that Trump is already talking about, especially the environmental stuff, the extractive stuff, the drilling stuff. That is one of the major parts of this document. As far as I can tell, I haven't read the entire 900 thing. If there's homework that I recommend, it's Emma Shortis's piece in The Conversation about it a few weeks ago. But
I'll put in the blurb.
Yeah. It's about abolishing as many restrictions on drilling and on fossil fuels as possible. So they're accusing Biden of waging a war on fossil fuels, even though US domestic oil production is at an all-time high at the moment. Now, to some extent, this is just a version of whatever happens when a Republican comes into office. Generally, literally the very first things that they do are to repeal the executive orders from the previous administration that had banned drilling on federal land. Or that had restricted drilling on federal land. That's what Trump did last time. That's what he's going to do this time. We know that because he's had these very informative dinners with oil executives saying, "You should give me $1 billion so that I can, lift all of these restrictions." It's certainly, not surprisingly, saying withdraw the United States from all of the Paris Agreement, from any from any multilateral climate agreement. And it's going back to the language of the first Trump administration about energy dominance. Yeah, it's not energy independence, it's energy dominance. We've got to dominate the entire world in energy. So that's one of the most substantively important things about it. It also has a major emphasis on foreign policy. Right, it clearly sees foreign policy as probably the most important function of the presidency, apart from fucking up the planet. But so it's very big on the idea that China has to be defeated. Right, China is not a competitor. China is an enemy. China has to be defeated. Now it's pretty vague on what that would actually involve, but it is very much And they're not talking about bringing the draft back, but they are talking about having military training in schools and testing for military aptitude in schools. They're talking about increasing the size of the military by 50,000 so that you can increasing the number of armed troops by 50,000 so that you can fight wars on two fronts. So they're very big on this belligerence with China. Trump is belligerent with China, but he doesn't seem to have much of an appetite for military belligerence with China. He's very economically belligerent on China, about as belligerent as you can be. But if China did forcibly reunify Taiwan, you're looking at who would be more likely to militarily respond to that. I'd say Biden is significantly more likely. I can't see Biden not responding to that militarily. Trump, I don't know. I honestly don't know which way which way it would go, because I think that he might well see it, and he might read his base as saying that this is actually not our fight. This has nothing to do with us. Certainly in the early days of his first administration, he actually alarmed the shit out of the Taiwanese by saying that the one China policy was on the table. So, yeah, I think that's actually a little bit out of step with Trump, but it is very in step with a lot of the people around Trump. I think there's actually a significant divergence between Trump himself and a lot of the scumbags around him when it comes to China. I think that a lot of these people who've rebranded themselves as MAGA are China hawks in the actual military sense, not just in the economic sense. And all this stuff about any university that takes money from the CCP is going to be deregistered and decertified. And given that you can construe anything, any kind of research partnership as this is taking money from the CCP, that's just a plan to disable universities even more, I think. In terms of the other foreign policy components, they kind of regrettably observe that the conservative movement is really split on Russia at the moment. And gee whiz, isn't this hard? We're really not sure what to do about that. So they kind of they punt on that. But they're against any kind of multilateral cooperation, or they do say they do talk more about spending more on sort of I think they refer to them as priority allies, or something like that. So
would Australia be one of them?
Potentially, yeah. I think Australia does get. Emma mentioned it gets mentioned 7 times. I'm not sure if it got mentioned in that context or not. But okay. Another area where it now diverges significantly from Trump is banning mifepristone. Yeah. So it says the federal government should use its power to ban mifepristone.
Yep.
They seem to be heading very much towards blanket abortion bans. They don't say it explicitly, but when you're talking about banning mifepristone, which is how most abortion is happening now, and so given that Trump has considerably, the platform softened the language on both abortion and same-sex marriage, this actually appears to be moving in the opposite direction.
Well, the head of the Heritage Foundation, Kevin Roberts, popped up on MSNBC for reasons I do not understand. and they asked him about exactly that question, and this is what he said.
Does Heritage and Project 2025 believe that a woman should be able to have an abortion if her doctor says that she needs one? It's a yes or no question.
Abortion is not health care.
So
abortion
is
is
a
the
no?
murder of a human being.
All right.
So that's a no. In terms of in terms of the overall sort of organization of the American economy, one of the ideas is that all states should get labor law waivers for 5 years to show that the conditions of workers would not deteriorate at all without unions.
Oh.
So basically trying to pave the way for a country without unions. Look, my overall read on this is it's a recipe for good old-fashioned oligarchy. It's dismantling any part of the government that can possibly place restrictions on the local tyrants of the business world. It's enabling any kind of gain possible with no restrictions on, with no environmental restrictions, with no kind of labour restrictions, with as little taxation as possible, with as little regulation as possible. It's a very old-fashioned kind of conservative program. At many points, that is in sync with Trumpism. But I think it's inaccurate to characterise it, as it often has been, as the sort of the full MAGA or full Trump document. You're actually ignoring these elements that Trump has made part of the program around, well, first of all, trying to make himself more electable, but also like the stuff around protecting Medicare and Social Security. The traditional welfare for white America, which Trump's always been in favour of.
Trump will be very pleased to hear that you said that, because he's been trying to distance himself from Project 2025 as much as he possibly can.
Yes.
He truthed out recently, I have no idea who is behind it. I disagree with some of the things they're saying, and some of the things they're saying are absolutely ridiculous and abysmal. Anything they do, I wish them luck, but I have nothing to do with them. It's interesting how he can both know nothing about something and also think that they're being ridiculous and abysmal.
Yes. Now, despite that disavowal, and even though it is out of sync with him, I still think if he becomes president, there's a significant chance that a lot of this could become reality, because he's got so little attention to so many policy issues. Someone's going to fill the void. If the program is, and he definitely is on board with the idea of fill it up with Trump loyalists, if they're not only Trump loyalists, but people who've gone through Project 2025's version of LinkedIn, there'll be people who are committed to this whole program, not just to the parts of it that Trump likes. So I think it is perfectly legitimate to attack Trump over 2025, because I'd say there's a very good chance that this is where a lot of his policy is going to be coming from.
We should also say that the people behind this are part of the Trump administration.
Yes.
Like 25 of the 30 chapter authors of Project 2025 served as members of the Trump administration.
Yes.
31 of the 38 people responsible for writing and editing Project 2025 were appointed or nominated to positions in the Trump administration and transition.
Yep.
So we're talking about the same group of people here. And I as you guys can see, I have a big long list of them here, but I'm not going to waste time reading them out. Take it from me. All the most important people were from the Trump administration, especially Russell Vought, who seems to be across all policies to do with Trump and to do with Project 2025.
Yes.
He seems to be a real key guy, Russell Vought. As you say, it doesn't necessarily mean he'll follow it, but but like you suspect he will. All I will note is that prior to the 2016 election, they had another mandate for leadership put out. They had 334 unique policy recommendations 1 year into Trump's term. The Heritage Foundation themselves claimed that 64% of the policy prescriptions were included in Trump's budget, implemented through regulatory guidance or under consideration for action in accordance with the Heritage Foundation's original proposals.
Or under consideration for action.
I was going to say, now they're tooting their own horn, number one.
Yep.
Number two, including in a budget doesn't mean jack, because everyone always ignores the budget, and that is relatively stringent compared to in accordance. Under consideration for action, which is, so I don't know what that means.
It means patent pending, doesn't it?
Yeah, pretty much. Look. I mean, I'm guessing that
it means someone cornered Trump at a Mar-a-Lago function and mentioned it, and Trump nodded before moving off to the next corner.
Either way, the fact is 70 Heritage Foundation employees were part of his administration, and that, as you say, personnel is policy.
Yes.
And that's in
right.
itself. So, Richard,
it's very difficult to, whatever is the case with Project 2025. By the way, if you want something to become a medic, put a number in it.
Yeah.
Project 2025, Agenda 21, MS13.
Yes.
This stuff really seems to be sticky.
Yeah.
It's very difficult to look at the Heritage Foundation and say, this is a think tank with very little influence. It has massive influence, especially through its appointees. It doesn't really matter if every single one of these line items is under consideration or not, because the people who are going to be working within the Trump administration and already have been are considering it. They're considering it every day when they make policy, whether it looks like this or not. And it's striking how much how little in the last few episodes we've talked about policy. I mean, Biden and Trump, the way that they campaign, I think if you asked an average American to do a pop quiz on what their policies were, I think they would struggle harder in this election than they have in any other in living memory. It's very difficult to know what they're for apart from being against each other. And even this Project 2025, like you say, it all falls under the umbrella of owning the libs.
I should say that part of the reason presumably Trump's trying to distance himself from this is it polls terribly. Navigator poll, after reading 19 proposed policies from Project 2025, opposition grows from 49% to 63%. Support for the plan declines from 31% to 24%. When Republicans learn more about Project 2025, the non-MAGA support drops to 24%. The pro-MAGA support rises to 66%.
Wow.
Which is interesting. But I did flag that there's a lot of viral pictures, like lists of all the things that are in Project 2025, and most of them, not most of them, a lot of them are not true.
Yep.
So I just flicked through a few of them quickly.
Yep.
I didn't have time to read all the pages.
Yeah.
But I did a quick flick and just did a quick value check. So here are some of the things that I saw on lists that I thought it did and didn't do. End no-fault divorce, no. Cut Social Security or raise the retirement age, no. Ban studying slavery in schools, no. End same-sex marriage, no. Push using the military to break up protests, no. End birthright citizenship, no. Banning Muslims from entering the country, no. Eliminate the EPA or the FDA, no. Pack the courts, no. Arming teachers in schools, no. But here's the things I saw kind of did that it does do. Lots of tax cuts for rich people and a slight tax increase for the poor. Undermines unions, doesn't ban them entirely. You already talked about that.
Yep.
Messes with Medicare, although it avoids obvious cuts, but there are some more subtle cuts there. Eliminates the Department of Education, pushes vouchers for private religious schools, but doesn't push teaching religious beliefs in public schools, which was interesting. Ending DEI policies, they're big on that one. Reform the EPA, but doesn't outright ban climate protection. Increasing Arctic drilling, deregulating big business and oil companies, breaking up the DHS and the FBI, but not defunding the programs, just separating them into different departments. Pushing deportations, doesn't mention any camps though. Dismantling the NOAA, that's the National Oceans and Atmospheric Association. Yes, it's weather guys. Ban transgender service in the military. They're pretty big on transgender stuff.
Yeah.
They got a lot to say about that.
On the point about breaking up the DHS, so it's putting most of it in the Department of Defense and also saying that the sole role of the Department of Defense is to fight war. So that's how they're thinking about immigration policy.
Right.
Yes.
Well, that's worth mentioning.
Yes.
They basically, I haven't read it enough to be an expert on this, but I was just going to say that there is a lot of talk about transgender issues and also in particular about pornography. They're obsessed with pornography. But when they say pornography, they don't mean porn. They mean anything that's, in their views, sexually degrading. So they're including gender theory in that.
Yes. Yeah.
That's part of their inverted commas pornography. Like I've got some quotes here. Pornography is manifested today in the omnipresent propagation of transgender ideology and sexualization of children. The people who produce and distribute it should be imprisoned. Educators and public librarians who purvey it should be classed as registered sex offenders. And telecommunications and technology firms that facilitate the spread should be shuttered. So in most cases, I think it's actually less extreme than it's been made out to be.
Yeah.
In this case, I think it's more extreme than it's been made out to be.
What's funny is that they are trying to take 1980s moral panic conservatism around porn and just transplant it onto transgender issues, which have nothing to do with it. So they just have to redefine pornography to be something that it is not.
Yes.
Pornography in contemporary American society is manifested in Pornhub.
Yes.
Not in school libraries.
Yes. My guess is whoever wrote this afterwards went straight to the incest porn section of Pornhub.
Do not pass go.
Yes.
My guess is they went straight to the trans porn section of Pornhub. But anyway.
Yeah.
Okay, so do you have anything else to say about Project 2025? Because you flagged that things we know about Trump's Trump's policies, we might as well talk about his actual platform, which came out this week.
Yeah, so the platform, when we say his platform,
The Republican
This is the
platform.
Republican Party platform. This is his platform. Okay, so
It is.
Yeah, there is no separation between these two things.
There are 20 points of all caps that could only have been written by Trump.
Yes. So you might remember last time around, there was no 2020 platform.
No.
Which meant that they had to use the 2016 platform, which was pretty significantly out of date.
Yeah, including references to Obama.
Yes.
It explicitly had references. It sounds like a joke, but they had references to Obama there that they did not remove or change to Hillary Clinton.
I bring this up to make the point of how little the party platform actually matters in today's election campaign. Yeah, in today's election campaign environments. I think it... I don't know if it ever really meant anything, but certainly it doesn't. People are not paying much attention to the platform now. But to the extent that they are, we are seeing it's part of this increasing discipline of the Trump campaign this year in terms of just trying to avoid issues that are hurting him.
Yep.
And of course, the biggest one of those is abortion.
Yep.
So there is nothing in there about a national abortion ban. There's nothing in there about the possibility of weakening same-sex partnerships.
I will qualify that a little bit in a second, but,
Yep.
but you can keep on going.
Oh, no.
Oh, okay, qualify it
ahead.
now? Sure.
Yes.
Okay. All right. I mean, what you're saying is correct. The 2016 and 2020 Republican platforms did call for a national abortion ban. They demanded a constitutional amendment to establish due process rights for embryos and fetuses. And they stated that the unborn child has a fundamental right to life which cannot be infringed. Whereas now, this is literally the entire abortion platform. I'll read it out.
Yep.
We proudly stand for families and life. We believe that the 14th Amendment to the Constitution of the United States guarantees that no person can be denied life or liberty without due process, and that the states are, therefore, free to pass laws protecting those rights. After 51 years, because of us, that power has been given to the states, and to a vote of the people, we will oppose late-term abortion while supporting mothers and policies that advance prenatal care, access to birth control, and IVF. So it sounds like they're saying, leave it up to states, which is the Trump policy, and we're against late-term abortions, which they're very open about. Fine, no problems. That's their popular points of view. The reason why I'd say I have a slight qualifier is let's just read one of those sentences again.
Okay.
We believe the 14th Amendment to the Constitution of the United States guarantees that no person can be denied life or liberty without due process, and then you go on. What's a person?
This
What's a person?
This sounds like fetal personhood. Is this fetal personhood?
If you happen to believe that the person is a fetus, then that means no abortions.
Opens the door.
Yeah, so I don't think that's an accident. And I'll tell you why I don't think it's an accident. If you think I'm a conspiracy theory, I've got a very, very good reason. On July 2, the Susan B. Anthony Pro-Life America Foundation warned Trump not to remove national protections for the unborn in the GOP platform and to continue its ironclad commitment to protect the unborn. A couple of days later, they were doing interviews, even on CNN, the sworn enemy of the Trump administration, saying that they think the whole thing has been rigged and that they've been kept out of the loop and that the fix is in. They were not very happy. Yet, on July 8, after the platform came out, they said the language included in the new platform meets its demands, they said. Quote, it is important that the GOP reaffirmed its commitment to protect unborn life today through the 14th Amendment.
There we go.
Under this amendment, it is Congress that enacts and enforces its provisions. The Republican Party remains strongly pro-life at the national level. So they very explicitly pointed to that sentence.
Yes.
So I don't think it's an accident.
No.
I think that what they're doing is they're trying to keep the pro-life wing happy, while at the same time not raise any red flags for people who aren't obsessed with this issue.
Yeah.
But I still think the fetal personhood stuff is still there.
Once again, what you'd be worried about is that this is one of those issues that Trump doesn't care about at all, will not be paying any attention to. He's not going to be the one making policy on this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And by the way, just to finish off what you were saying there were some other issues they left out. Guns, they left out.
Yep.
Same-sex marriage, they left out.
Yep.
Doesn't mean they've changed their mind. It means that they know it's bad politics. But having said that, if you're talking about Trump, if he knows it's bad politics, it ain't going to happen.
No.
Because that's the way Trump rolls.
Yes.
It's also, personally, I read a discussion the other day which suggested that Donald Trump is secretly the most left-wing Republican president since Nixon.
Nothing secret about it. He just is.
Yeah. So there you go. You share the secret. And now Peppers can share it too. What do you think, Dave?
No.
Who's more left wing?
No, well, okay. There's a lot of different components to left and right ideology.
Fair.
If you're just looking purely in terms of adherence to what has been conservative economic ideology, then yes, okay, yeah, he's the least adherent to that since Nixon. But in terms of his social beliefs and his general world outlook and his racial beliefs, I'd say he's more. I can't even name who was more conservative who was more. Conservative is the wrong word. Who's more right wing than him? This is someone who campaigned on police brutality. This is someone who originally campaigned on Barack Obama not being a real American. This is the kind of vision that he has of the United States is just an unrepentantly kind of pre-civil rights vision of America. I think that, no, I wouldn't call him the most left-wing. Maybe, on just purely on sort of economic orthodoxy, no. Maybe, but not on any other dimension of left and right.
I mean, how about with gay people? He's way more left than any Republican president before on gay people.
That I see that as pure opportunism on his part. When you actually get into his, when you get into things that affect his world in any way, basically these are not things that affect his world in any way. So
okay, well, different points of view. There you go. That's why it's a secret.
One thing we have not heard very much about, any Obamacare seems to be part of the furniture.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, good call.
That was the obsessional fixation.
Yeah.
Of the first Trump presidential campaign.
Yeah.
Now forgotten.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, that's correct.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, and I think that while you make the point that no one cares about the platform, there is one person who does care about the platform, and that's Trump. Given that
does he though?
No, he doesn't.
Has he read it? Has Donald Trump read
No, I'm sure he wrote those all caps points. I'm sure. I mean, they're barely in English. They just reek of Trump. Right? I'm sure he wrote them. And so I'm not saying he feels restricted by the platform.
Yeah.
But what I'm saying is the platform is what he thinks, I think. And so I think that if the platform ignores it, it's not going to happen. I might be wrong. Feel free to remind me of this in a few years' time. But I think that's actually, my personal view, I think Project 2025 is worth looking at. I really should look at it. I think it's worth looking at as a source of questions for Trump to pin him down. But I think if you actually want to know what's going to happen, I think the GOP platform is probably a better indication.
Yeah.
I also think that Agenda 47, which no one seems to have mentioned for ages, that exists, guys. That's on Trump's campaign campaign website. Like there are links to actual policies there that Trump is willing to own. Like one of them, no one even talks about this. It's got nothing to do with Project 2025 or the GOP platform. Impoundment might be the biggest issue of the first year of the Trump administration. For those who don't know, impoundment is the idea that the president can just decide what not to spend money on. Like the Congress says, okay, we're going to fund the government.
Yeah.
And
the president says no.
The president says, I'm not going to spend that money on the Department of Education. Sorry. See you later, Department of Education, which is explicitly something he said in the Agenda 47 platform. So that's going to be huge because the Supreme Court said no to that. Well, first of all, there was a legislation against it after Nixon, and the Supreme Court has since said that it's not constitutional anyway, and he's going for it. So we'll see. I mean, that is the way that he is going to try and enact a lot of things. If the Republicans don't control all levers of power, that's how he's going to get stuff done. He's going to try to get stuff done through impounding. So that's massive, but it's not in Project 2025, so no one talks about it. But the other thing I'd say is that I think you make a great point about this not obsession, unfair word, the focus on the bureaucracy in Project 2025, because we know that's going to happen.
Yeah.
Because Trump already tried it.
Yes. Yep.
So we know it's going to happen again. And my personal view, when people ask me about things that, like, you know, I have obviously unorthodox views about various things. One of the things which possibly the thing I am most nervous about in an upcoming Trump administration is messing with the bureaucracy. And I'll tell you why. It's not because I'm worried about some regulation here or there. It's because one of the key parts of the bureaucracy is the statistics gathering. And I could just see Trump putting his thumb on, like, appointing loyalists in the Commerce Department and messing around with the unemployment figures. And once you infect statistics gathering with politicization, it does not go back.
Well,
it's done. It's done for good. And then you have a situation where no one can trust anything, and we're arguing without any evidence, and that's a horrible situation.
One of the parts of Project 2025 is abolishing the Federal Reserve, which, among other things, collects a lot of pretty key economic data. Replacing it with a system of free banking.
Oh, God.
I don't think I've heard the term free banking since that Ron Paul rally in 2008 that I went to in Ann Arbor. So God knows what they actually mean by that. Everybody imagines their own different thing when they think of free banking, but
it's a problem. It's a problem. Like, I was thinking about the medical stuff with Biden. I was thinking how we're in a situation where people don't really trust his doctor. And people really don't trust what the White House says about what Biden's doing. I hate that situation. Imagine if that's for everything. For everything. That would really suck.
One terrible and completely unnecessary entry into the Biden debate was Fauci saying it's consistent with a cold. That, I mean, I would sit that one out if I were him.
Anyway, what are your thoughts, Rich?
We're already talking about a second Trump term and what it would look like. A little bonus to that discussion about whether Trump was secretly left-wing was some people saying, okay, well, this time we know what Trump is like. We know that he's forgetful. We know that he's easy to manipulate. If Democrats can eat crow, or Jim Crow in this case, it's actually not that hard to manipulate Trump into supporting policies that you like. What do you think? It's worth a shot, isn't it?
Well, but not if he's surrounded by loyalists who've been...
How do you get to him?
Well, we speak to him via the media. This is, I mean, if Kim Kardashian can do it...
That's true.
Surely others can as well. I mean, isn't the inside word, even amongst Trump loyalists, that the first administration was a disappointment, that it was a bit of a damp squib, that it went off course and ran into the bureaucracy? That can happen again.
Fair enough. I guess so. I don't have much to add because I'm still trying to imagine how you actually do it.
I also want to reiterate a point I've made before about the, replacing the entire bureaucracy. I actually don't think that's going to help Trump get what he wants to get done. I actually don't think replacing the entire bureaucracy with a lot of people who have no experience and no idea what they're doing is actually going to get those things done. What it just does is destroy government.
Yeah, it just destroys everything.
Which is, I mean, that is at least part of what the Heritage Foundation, wants to get done. Anyway,
one thing that's notable about this generation of conservatives is that they are extremely poor at building things.
Yes.
They're very good at making critiques of liberal institutions. But the moment they start trying to make a university, it winds up like Trump University.
Yes.
People say it's grifts all the way down. I agree. I think that destroying the government is, the old line about you make it small enough to drown in a bathtub. That's its own conservative end. But in terms of this sort of positive, national conservative implementation of policy, it's much more difficult.
Yeah.
Certainly, DeSantis is finding that that things that he thinks are getting done a year or two later aren't really getting done like he thought they were.
Yep.
I would say that. Do you have anything else to say about this topic?
No.
No? Okay. Well, I reckon we may got 10 more minutes here. RFK?
I'll let you guys take this.
Is the only person having a worse campaign than Biden?
Well, he's not doing great at the moment. Just very quickly. His polling's just been slipping gradually. He's according to Fox, he went from 15% against Biden and Trump last November to 12% in March, 10% in June. And 538, he's now 9.2%. His average favorability recently was minus 10.3%, which, hey, it's better than Trump and Biden, but not much better. This does always happen to third-party candidates, though, as people focus on the race. I think I think that the not being a debate was a real blow for him, because he's down on money, and that's the way you get money. I also think that the more people hate, I mentioned this last week, that I think the more people hate the majority parties, people often think that means they'll like the third parties more,
No.
whereas actually it's the opposite.
Yeah.
Because since people are driven by hatred, the more they hate the other parties, the less they want to take a risk with the third party.
Yes,
Because they're
yeah.
just going to get the other party, you know? So I think he's got problems there. Yep.
Yeah, and I mean, look, in another world, in a fantasy football version, you might have someone who turns out to be a great, campaigner. They're able to sort of articulate this third position. Let's have a look at what's happened to RFK, because there's been a lot of focus on what happened to Biden with things not going so well.
Yes.
So since RFK's campaign started,
Yes.
first of all, he admitted that he'd been diagnosed with brainworms.
Yes.
Literal brainworms.
Yes.
Not figurative brainworms.
No, I understand.
He had a worm inside his brain.
He did.
And part of his brain was removed, the part that had the worm in it.
Yeah, it's a very small part.
Sure.
Yeah. No, you're right.
Yes.
It's not good politics.
Are you going to quibble about the brainworm?
I always thought the brainworm thing was way overplayed, but I understand that it doesn't sound good.
Last time we used this as an excuse to inflict Dr. Worm on the Peppers.
We did.
So
really?
We're not going to do that again.
Let's move along quickly then.
Let's definitely not go to them.
So non-controversial, less controversial than the brainworm.
Yeah.
He seems to have eaten a dog.
Okay. Let's talk about this.
Yeah.
It's a double. It's a double.
Yeah.
We're talking the Vanity. Oh, so you keep on going.
So it's the Vanity Fair article.
Vanity Fair article.
And the Vanity Fair article was illustrated with a photo of RFK next to
this photo.
Next to what a vet confirmed to be a roast dog.
Now when
Sorry. The vet confirmed that it was a dog. He did not confirm the cooking method.
Well, okay. Now, when you say that the vet confirmed the dog, according to Vanity Fair,
Yep.
I got to jump on here, right? Because RFK has a I think often unhelpful honesty, where he's happy to admit lots of things.
He's a truth teller.
Yeah. Well, in certain respects, certainly when it comes to his personal behavior, he seems to be a truth teller. And he insists that it was asado in Patagonia, which is usually lamb. He thinks it was a goat in this particular case. And if you look at pictures of asado, it looks exactly like that. So I'm willing to believe him over Vanity Fair. That you might not.
So-called vet.
You might not, but I'm willing to believe him, especially willing to believe him because he didn't admit, but he didn't deny a much bigger problem from the same article.
Yes.
Which was the sexual assault claims, which is I'll just talk about that quickly. I'm going to just read out from Vanity Fair here so I don't get sued. This is from Vanity Fair. In 1998, Candy and his second wife, Mary Richardson, hired a 23-year-old babysitter named Eliza Clooney, who moved into their family home to watch their 4 children. Candy's inappropriate behaviour towards Clooney began one night in 1998 when he started rubbing his hand up and down her thigh under the kitchen table. Clooney wrote in her diary that she wasn't sure whether he was on something or really tired or was missing Mary or was testing me. Candy later appeared in her bedroom, perusing the intimate details of her life in her diary, and asked her to rub his back with lotion, an incident that she told Vanity Fair was totally inappropriate. In another instance, he came up behind her as she searched for something in the pantry and began groping her hips, ribcage, and chest, and didn't stop until interrupted by another staff member. My back was to the door of the pantry and he came up behind me, said Clooney. I was frozen, shocked. Clooney left the family a few months later, writing in her diary that she wanted to leave bad men behind. Okay, so that was the claim in Vanity Fair. This was the interview where he was asked about the dog and asked about sexual assault. I can play the dog bits if do you want me to play dog bits as well?
I'd love to hear.
Okay,
I'd love you to play the dog bits.
Okay, I'll play the whole lot. Okay, so this is the dog and the sexual assault, and you can compare his denials.
Okay.
There's a photo circulating, I believe, of you posing with what looks like a dog, and also a barbecued dog. I'm not going to show the picture as a dog lover. I know you have pets yourself, and also a sexual assault allegation from one of your former nannies. So I want to give you a chance to respond to that.
Yeah. Sorry. The article is a lot of garbage. The picture that they said is of me eating a dog. It's actually me eating a goat in Patagonia on a whitewater trip many years ago on the Fuleifu River. They say there's an expert. They have an expert that has identified that as a dog carcass.
Yeah,
it's just not true. So, and in terms of the other allegations, I've said this from the beginning. I am not a church boy. I am not running like that. I said I had a very, very rambunctious youth. I said in my announcement speech that I have so many skeletons in my closet that if they could all vote, I could run for king of the world. Mm-hmm. So, this Vanity Fair is recycling 30-year-old stories, and I'm not, going to comment on the details of any of them, but I am who I am.
You're talking there about the nanny situation. I mean, I do have to ask her. I mean, are you denying it or not?
I'm not going to comment on it.
All right. Well, I gave you the opportunity.
Okay. But I love the suggestion that all of the skeletons in his closet would be voting for him.
He's very pro-skeleton. He's very popular amongst the skeleton community.
Before we dive in any deeper, first off, can anyone in the United States talk anymore? Can anyone who's running for office just talk like a normal person anymore? Because it seems like the answer is no. Now, I'm not a vet. I'm not sure. I'm not going to delve into the number of ribs this had or whatever. But what I will say is this. We already know that confessing to a sexual assault is not disqualifying when you're running for president anymore.
That's true. Yeah.
While confessing to eating a dog, which they call a barbecue dog, is an unknown quantity.
So while we know, if you shoot a dog, you're in trouble.
That's right.
Yes.
Yeah. If you harm an animal in that way, we already know that can get you in trouble. So I don't think you think it's consistent that he's confessing to one. I think that just says something sad about the nature of politics today.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, so you don't believe him about the dog? You think it is a dog?
I think it's a dog.
Okay.
I've seen a roast dog before, and it looks like a roast dog to me.
Okay. Look, I believe him. I've seen a lot of pictures of Asado in the last few weeks. Look, I believe him about that. But I also think it's just amazing that he doesn't even try to deny the sexual assault. He just talked about his rambunctious youth when he was 45 years old. Rambunctious youth. Anyway, so that is do we have anything else to say about RFK? We're running out of time. No.
Well, it's now like presidential candidate does not deny sexual assault. Again, is we've gotten it to almost we're into hour 4.
Yes,
we're right at the tail end of the podcast, and we're into hour 4, and we're just doing it as a little bit of fun before the horoscopes.
Still pulling 9% of the vote.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I'm just going to leave. I don't know how much time we got left. We might be hitting the 3-hour barrier, but if we're not, I'm going to insert as just a little nice little note to go out on. Another one of RFK's problems, which is his VP pick, which we haven't discussed. Because Kenny's meant to be all about principle. Him picking a VP who appears to have nothing going for her other than being a cash cow, I imagine that wouldn't have impressed his supporters a lot. She's also pretty left. She comes off as a bit of a, inverted commas, globalist. None of these are good things for Kennedy's base. But you talked about can't anyone speak anymore.
Mm-hmm.
I present for you, depending on how long we've got left, how long I'm going to play this clip, why Kennedy's VP thinks she should be VP.
Spend a moment talking about foreign policy because as vice president, if the worst case scenario would happen, you'd become the commander in chief. And I'm curious what in your background prepares you to be commander in chief?
I think that I have a very sophisticated view on foreign affairs due to my previous work, both in intellectual property law. I understand how global commerce works. I understand how we build batteries around the world. I understand the importance of semiconductors. I understand that big foreign policy decisions are made specifically around semiconductors. And I also am multicultural. My background is one in which I've spent most of my spiritual life studying world religions. And I think it's really important right now for us to understand and respect each other's religious alignment, and understand the depths and the nuances of it. I think that also I have a great deal of understanding, compassion, strength, and will to put America first.
For those who are listening to that, I mean, you heard the key parts, but what you missed out was the vision of the interviewer nodding, thinking, what the fuck is she saying? It was great vision.
I spent most of my spiritual life studying world religions. I love it.
When somebody, in my experience, and I'm not casting aspersions on her, but the only people I've ever heard talk about semiconductors and world religions on their spiritual journey back to back like that have been high.
Okay, gents, we've come to the end of the first ever TriPodcast. Pretty exciting stuff, don't you agree?
Oh, exhilarating.
I think we've changed the game.
Yeah.
I don't know what the game was, but it's just been changed.
I feel like we're in the landing capsule in the ocean and they're fishing us out.
That's right. It's been a long descent.
Pretty much from the beginning.
Yes.
Thank you, Dr. Dave.
My pleasure.
Thank you, Richie.
Thank you. And thank you, Peppers, for having us again.
Yeah.
We'll see you guys next week.
Bye.
Hey, Peppy.